I pretended to be bankrupt and begged my own children for shelter. My wealthy son slammed the door in my face and handed me a $20 bill. Only my youngest son, a poor teacher living in the slums, took me in. He was ready to sell his wedding ring just to buy me a hot meal. The next morning, my lawyer arrived with a $75 million check. When I revealed the truth, the look on their faces was worth every single penny. Before I tell you how I taught them the most brutal lesson of their lives, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The rain was coming down in sheets, cold and unforgiving against my skin. I stood at the end of the long, winding driveway looking up at the house that my money had built. It was a $5 million mansion in the most exclusive gated community in Atlanta. The marble columns were spotless. The lawn was manicured to perfection, and the golden light spilling from the windows looked warm and inviting. But I knew there was no warmth inside that house. Not for me, not tonight. My name is Desmond Carter. To the world, I am the founder of Carter Shipping, a logistics empire that moves cargo across 3 oceans. I have shaken hands with presidents and signed deals worth more than the GDP of small countries. But tonight, I was just an old man in a soaked, moth-eaten coat. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. I had bought these clothes from a thrift store 3 towns over. I had taken a pair of scissors to my own shoes, cutting a hole right near the big toe so that the freezing water would seep in with every step. I rubbed dirt under my fingernails and stopped shaving for 4 days. I needed to look the part. I needed to look like a man who had lost everything. I took a deep breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. I was 70 years old. My bones ached in this weather, but the pain in my body was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I walked up the stone steps, leaving muddy footprints on the pristine walkway. I reached out a trembling hand and pressed the video doorbell. I waited. Inside, I could hear soft jazz music playing. I could smell the faint aroma of roasted lamb and rosemary. My stomach growled, not because I was starving, but because I was nervous. This was the test. The ultimate test. The heavy oak door swung open. It wasn't my son, Marcus. It was his wife, Chloe. She stood there in a silk evening gown, a glass of Chardonnay in her hand. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled and diamonds glittered at her throat. Diamonds that I had paid for when I gave Marcus his bonus last Christmas. She looked at me, and for a second there was no recognition in her eyes. Just pure, unadulterated disgust. She wrinkled her nose as if she had just smelled a sewer rat. "Marcus," she yelled over her shoulder, not taking her eyes off me. "There is some homeless man on the porch. He is getting mud all over the imported welcome mat." She made a motion to slam the door, but I stuck my foot in the jamb. My wet, ruined shoe touched the polished wood of her entryway. "Chloe," I rasped, making my voice sound weaker than it was. "It is me. It is Desmond." She froze. She leaned in closer, squinting against the porch light. The realization hit her, but it didn't bring warmth. It brought horror. "Desmond," she whispered, but the tone was sharp. "Oh my God. What happened to you? You look like you slept in a dumpster." She didn't step back to let me in. She stood firmly in the doorway, blocking the heat from the house. She actually raised her hand to cover her nose. "Marcus," she shrieked again, louder this time. "You need to come here right now. Your father is here and he looks hideous." I heard heavy footsteps approaching. My eldest son, Marcus, appeared behind her. He was 45 years old, a bank executive who wore 3-piece suits even on Sundays. He looked at me and his jaw dropped. But I didn't see concern. I didn't see a son worried about his elderly father standing in a freezing downpour. I saw embarrassment. He looked past me, scanning the street to see if any of the neighbors were watching. "Dad," he hissed, stepping out onto the porch and pulling the door half closed behind him so the heat wouldn't escape. "What is this? Is this some kind of joke? Why are you dressed like a beggar?" I let my shoulders slump. I let my hands shake violently. "It is gone, Marcus," I said, my voice cracking. "It is all gone." "What is gone?" he asked, impatience dripping from every word. "The IRS, I lied. They came this morning. They froze the company accounts. They seized the penthouse. They took the cars. They said there was an investigation. Tax fraud. Embezzlement. I do not understand it, son. I lost everything. They locked me out of my own home." Marcus turned pale, but it wasn't fear for me. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He wasn't thinking about where I would sleep. He was thinking about his inheritance. He was thinking about his reputation at the bank. Tax fraud. He repeated, his voice rising in panic. Dad, are you serious? Do you have any idea what this does to me? I am up for a promotion next month. If the board finds out my father is a criminal under investigation, I am finished. I am cold son, I said, taking a step forward. Please. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I just need a place to sleep tonight, just until I can call a lawyer in the morning. I tried to step past him toward the warmth of the foyer, toward the smell of the roasted lamb. Marcus put a hand on my chest. He didn't push me hard, but he stopped me. The physical rejection hit me harder than a bullet. Whoa, wait a minute, he said. You cannot go in there, Dad. Look at you. You are dripping wet. You smell like mildew. Marcus Chloe chimed in from behind him, her voice shrill. We have the pristine white carpets in the living room. And do not forget, the Potters are coming over for brunch tomorrow morning. We cannot have him here. What would we tell them? That your father is a homeless criminal. I looked at my son. This was the boy I had carried on my shoulders. This was the boy whose tuition I had paid for at the most expensive private schools in the country. This was the man whose mortgage I had cleared 2 years ago because he said the interest rates were stressing him out. Marcus. I pleaded, looking him dead in the eye. I am your father. I have nowhere else to go. It is raining. I am 70 years old. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking stressed. He looked at Chloe, then back at me. Dad, listen, he said, lowering his voice. This is the really bad time. You know how important appearances are in this neighborhood. The Homeowners Association has strict rules about guests. And honestly, Chloe is right. We have a huge event tomorrow. We cannot have this kind of drama right now. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out his wallet, a leather wallet I had bought him for his birthday. He thumbed through a stack of $100 bills. I saw the flash of Benjamin's. He hesitated. Then he pulled out a single $20 bill. Here, he said, shoving the crumpled bill into my freezing hand. There is a motel down on 4th Street, the cheap one. Or maybe the shelter downtown. They take people in. Your situation. I stared at the $20. It wasn't even enough for a cab ride to the shelter he was talking about. You are kicking me out, I asked quietly. I am not kicking you out, Dad, Marcus said, already backing up toward the door. I am just managing the situation. You need to get this IRS thing sorted out. Don't come back until you are clean and this legal mess is cleared up. I cannot be associated with this. I have a reputation to protect. But Marcus, I started. Go, Dad, he snapped. Before the neighbors see you. Please, just go. Chloe stepped forward and grabbed the handle of the heavy door. She looked at me one last time, her lip curled. And take your shoes off the porch before you leave, she said. You are leaving mud marks on the limestone. She slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the night. I stood there for a moment, staring at the dark wood, the rain dripping from the brim of my hat onto my nose. I could hear the lock click, then the deadbolt. I looked down at the $20 bill in my hand. My son, a man who lived in a $5 million house because of my hard work, had given me $20 and told me to sleep in a shelter. The rage started in my stomach, hot and burning, fighting back the cold of the rain. But beneath the rage was a heartbreak so deep I thought my knees would buckle. I had raised a monster. I had raised a vulture who only loved me when my wallet was open. I turned around and walked back down the stone steps. The rain was falling harder now, mixing with the tears I refused to let fall. I walked down the long driveway, past the luxury SUVs parked in the garage, past the perfectly trimmed hedges. I reached the street and stopped. I pulled out my phone from the deep pocket of my ragged coat. It was a burner phone I had bought for this experiment. I had one more stop to make, one more child to test. My daughter Serena, the self-proclaimed real estate queen of Atlanta. I dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. I knew where she was. She was at her office downtown. She always worked late on Fridays, broadcasting her hustle culture lifestyle to her 50,000 followers on Instagram. I started walking. It was a 5-mile walk to the city center. My hip was throbbing, and the hole in my shoe was scraping my skin raw. But I kept walking. I needed to know. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I arrived at her building an hour later. It was a glass tower that pierced the sky. The security guard in the lobby took one look at me and stepped out from behind his desk, his hand resting on his taser. Sir, you need to leave, he said firmly. No loitering. I am here to see Serena Carter. I said, my voice raspy. I am her father. The guard laughed. Yeah, and I am the King of England. Get out before I call the cops. Just then the elevator pinged. Serena walked out. She was dressed in a white power suit, holding a phone attached to a ring light, talking animatedly to the screen. So guys, the key to success is cutting out toxic energy and surrounding yourself with abundance, she was saying to her followers. You have to manifest wealth. You have to look the part. Serena, I called out. She stopped. She turned the camera toward me, then realized what she was seeing. She gasped and immediately ended the live stream. She rushed over not to hug me, but to block me from the view of the glass doors where people were walking by. Dad, she hissed, grabbing my arm with her manicured nails. What on earth are you doing here? You look disgusting. Are you trying to ruin my brand? Serena, I said, leaning against the wall for support. I lost everything. The business, the money, the house. I have nowhere to go. She looked around frantically, terrified that one of her high-end clients might see us. She dragged me toward the emergency exit away from the marble lobby. Dad, listen to me, she said, her voice tight. I cannot deal with this right now. I am launching a new luxury condo line next week. My image is everything. If people see me with this, she gestured to my wet clothes. It destroys my narrative of generational wealth and success. I just need a place to sleep, Serena, I said. Just a couch. Just for tonight. I cannot, she said quickly. Derek hates old people. Smell. And we just renovated the guest room into a podcast studio. There is no room. She reached into her purse. I thought she was going to give me money, but she pulled out a business card. Here, she said, shoving it into my pocket. This is the number for a homeless shelter downtown. I did a charity event there once for PR. They have soup. Go there. Serena. I am your father, I whispered. Then stop embarrassing me, she snapped. Go, please, just go away. She pushed me out the side door into the alleyway. The heavy metal door clanged shut behind me. I heard the lock engage. I stood in the dark alley, the smell of garbage and rain filling my nose. My own children, the flesh of my flesh. They had discarded me like a piece of trash the moment they thought I had no value. I reached into my pocket and touched the $20 bill Marcus had given me. It was all I had to show for 40 years of fatherhood. I had one child left, Jamal, my youngest, the one I had been hardest on, the one I had disappointed the most. Jamal, who had refused to join the family business because he wanted to be a history teacher in the inner city. Jamal, who I hadn't spoken to in 6 months because I told him he was wasting his potential on a teacher's salary. I didn't want to go to him. I was ashamed. I was afraid that he would reject me too, and if he did, I knew it would kill me. But I had nowhere else to go. I pulled my collar up against the wind and started walking toward the south side of the city, toward the slums, toward the only hope I had left. I didn't know it then, but I was walking toward the most painful and beautiful lesson of my life. And tomorrow, when the sun rose, I would bring a storm down on Marcus and Serena that would wash away their arrogance forever. The garage door rattled as it lowered behind me, shutting out the storm but trapping me in a cold concrete box. The air smelled of gasoline rubber and the faint, dusty scent of neglect. I stood there shivering in my soaked coat, water pooling around my ruined shoes. This was where my son chose to put me. Not the guest room with the heated floors, not even the living room rug. The garage. Marcus pointed to a folding plastic lawn chair tucked between his riding mower and a stack of winter tires. Sit there, he said, not meeting my eyes. And please, Dad, try not to drip on the epoxy floor. I just had it resurfaced last week. It cost $6,000. I lowered myself onto the cold plastic, my joints popping in protest. Through the door that led to the kitchen, I could hear the faint clinking of silverware and the murmur of warmth. They were inside, surrounded by the luxury I had paid for while I sat next to a bag of potting soil. A few minutes later, the door opened. It wasn't Marcus. It was Chloe. She stood on the single-step landing, looking down at me like I was a stray animal that had wandered into her territory. She held a chipped ceramic plate, one of the old ones we used to have for the dogs, and a glass of tap water. She didn't hand it to me. She placed it on top of a cardboard box 5 feet away and nudged the box toward me with her foot. Here, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. It is leftovers from last night. We cannot exactly cook a fresh steak for someone who just admitted to losing the family fortune. I looked at the plate. 2 heels of sourdough bread rock hard and stale, and a pile of wilted arugula salad that had turned a slimy gray color. There was no dressing, just limp leaves and crust. My stomach clenched not from hunger but from the sheer humiliation. "Thank you, Chloe," I whispered, my pride catching in my throat. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. She watched me reach for the bread with trembling hands. "It is honestly pathetic, Desmond," she said. "I always told Marcus this would happen eventually. You see it all the time with people like you." I paused the bread halfway to my mouth. "People like me." She let out a short, cruel laugh. "You know what I mean. Black men who come into money too fast. You do not know how to keep it. It is like you lack the gene for generational wealth preservation. It is probably hereditary. God, I hope Marcus takes after my side of the family when it comes to finances. I would hate for our children to inherit that incompetence." The insult hit me harder than the cold. She wasn't just attacking my bank account. She was attacking my blood, my history. "Chloe," I said, my voice steady despite the shivering, "I built an empire from nothing. I bought the ring on your finger. I paid for this house. That isn't genetics. That is hard work." She rolled her eyes. "Was Desmond. Was hard work. Now you are just a statistic. A broke old man sitting in a garage eating scraps. Marcus needs to focus on his future, and frankly, having a bankrupt father hanging around is a bad look. I do not want my friends from the club seeing this. It is embarrassing." Before I could respond, the door opened wider and Marcus stepped out. He had loosened his tie, looking annoyed. He checked his Rolex, a watch I gave him when he graduated business school. "Time to wrap it up, Dad," he said, his tone flat. "Chloe is right. We cannot keep this up all night." I looked at him. My own son. "Marcus, please." I begged, the desperation in my voice real this time. "I am exhausted. My hip is killing me. Just let me sleep here. I will sleep in the chair. I won't make a sound. I just need to be out of the rain for one night." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temples as if I were a difficult client he was trying to fire. "I cannot do that, Dad," he said. "Look, tomorrow is a big day. We are hosting the annual cocktail mixer for the bank's partners. The CEO is coming. It is a high-stakes event." So I asked. "I will be gone before they arrive." "No," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Caterers are coming at 6 a.m. to prep. The cleaning crew will be in and out of the garage grabbing supplies. If they see a homeless man sleeping next to the lawnmower, they are going to talk. Rumors spread fast in this town, Dad. I cannot risk anyone thinking I am related to this situation. This situation," I repeated. "I am your father, Marcus, not a situation." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He didn't look at me. He looked at the cash inside. I saw the flash of purple $500 bills. He flipped past them. He pulled out a single crumpled $20 bill. "Here," he said, thrusting it toward me. "This is enough for a cab to the downtown shelter. Or get yourself a hot meal at a diner. But you cannot stay here." I stared at the $20. It felt like a slap in the face. A final severance package from my own family. "You are kicking me out," I said softly. "In the middle of a storm." "I am not kicking you out," Marcus said, his voice rising defensively. "I am protecting my family, my real family, Chloe and the kids. We have a reputation, Dad. You should understand that better than anyone. Business is business." He grabbed my arm. His grip wasn't gentle. It was firm and patient. He pulled me up from the plastic chair. "Come on, let's go," he said, steering me toward the side door of the garage. I stumbled, my bad leg buckling, but he didn't slow down. He marched me to the door and shoved it open. The wind howled outside, rain lashing against the concrete. "Wait," I said, trying to steady myself against the door frame. "Marcus, think about what you are doing." "I am thinking," he said. "I am thinking that I have a party to host tomorrow, and I need this problem gone." He shoved the $20 bill into the pocket of my wet coat. "Good luck, Dad," he said. "Call me when you get your life back together. But do not come back until you do." He pushed me out into the darkness. I stumbled onto the wet asphalt of the driveway, almost falling into the mud. Behind me, the garage door slammed shut. I heard the heavy clank of the deadbolt sliding home. I stood there, the rain mixing with the hot tears of rage on my face. I looked at the closed door. I looked at the massive house glowing with warmth and light, a fortress of greed that I had paid for brick by brick. I reached into my pocket and crushed the $20 bill in my fist. My own son, my own flesh and blood. He chose an Italian sofa and a cocktail party over his father's life. He chose the approval of strangers over the man who raised him. The pain in my chest was unbearable, but as I turned away from the house, a cold resolve settled in my gut. They thought I was finished. They thought I was just a sad, broken old man they could toss out with the trash. They were wrong. I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. I pulled up the collar of my coat and began the long walk toward the city. I had one more stop to make, one more child to test, and God help them if they failed me like Marcus did. Because when the sun rose tomorrow, I wouldn't be the beggar anymore. I would be the judge, the jury, and the executioner of their inheritance. The walk from Marcus's garage to the city center took me nearly 2 hours. The rain had turned from a downpour into a freezing drizzle that soaked through the layers of my thrift store coat and settled deep into my bones. My hip, which I had injured years ago on a construction site, was screaming with every step, a sharp, rhythmic reminder of how far I had fallen in the eyes of my own family. But I kept walking. I had to know the truth. I had to see if the rot in my family tree had spread to every single branch. I finally reached the financial district. Towering above me was the Sterling Heights building, a structure of glass and steel that pierced the night sky. On the 45th floor was the headquarters of Serena Carter Real Estate. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment looking up at the lights. I remembered signing the check for the deposit on that office space. I remembered Serena crying tears of joy, hugging me, telling me I was the best father in the world. That was 10 years ago. Tonight I was about to find out if that father still existed to her or if he had expired the moment his bank account hit zero. I pushed through the revolving glass doors. The lobby was warm, smelling of lemon polish and expensive leather. My shoes squelched loudly on the polished marble floor, leaving a trail of muddy water behind me. I saw the receptionist, a young man with a sharp jawline and a suit that cost more than my first car, look up from his computer. His eyes widened. He didn't see a human being. He saw a stain on his perfect lobby. "Sir," he said, standing up and walking around the desk with his hand raised. "You cannot be in here. This is a private building." "I am here to see Serena Carter," I said, my voice rough from the cold. "I am her father." The young man scoffed a short burst of air through his nose. "Yeah, right. And I am the president. Look, buddy, we have a no solicitation policy. You need to leave before I call security." "I am not soliciting," I said, reaching into my pocket with a trembling hand to find my ID, but my fingers were too numb to grip it. "Please, just call her office. Tell her Desmond is downstairs." He reached for the radio on his belt, his patience gone. "I am giving you 3 seconds to turn around and walk out that door." Just then the elevator banks chimed. The golden doors slid open and a group of people walked out. In the center of them was Serena. My daughter looked radiant. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that looked like it had been tailored by angels. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, high ponytail, and her face was illuminated by a portable ring light she was holding in her left hand. She was talking into her phone, live streaming to her 100,000 followers. "Okay, guys," she was saying, flashing a blindingly white smile at the camera. "We just closed the deal on the penthouse. This is what I mean when I talk about manifesting abundance. You have to surround yourself with success to be successful. If something does not serve your higher purpose, you have to cut it loose. It is all about the aesthetic of your life." She walked right past the security desk, her eyes glued to her screen, her entourage trailing behind her, carrying swatches of fabric and blueprints. "Serena," I called out. She didn't hear me at first. She was too busy telling her fans about the importance of high vibrations. "Serena." I shouted louder this time. She stopped. She turned around the ring light, casting a halo around her face. For a split second, the camera was pointed right at me. I saw my own reflection on her screen, a wet, dirty, shivering old man with desperation in his eyes. The smile dropped from her face instantly. It was like a mask had fallen off. She gasped, her eyes darting from me to the phone screen. She realized thousands of people were watching this. "Oh my God," she muttered. She tapped the screen furiously, ending the live stream without even a goodbye to her fans. She shoved the phone into her purse and marched toward me, the click-clack of her heels echoing like gunfire in the lobby. "Dad," she hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my flesh through the wet coat. "What are you doing here?" "You look like a disaster, Serena," I said, relief washing over me that she had acknowledged me. "I need help." "Not here," she snapped. She looked around frantically. The receptionist was watching. Her assistants were watching. A few people walking their dogs outside were looking through the glass. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She grabbed the sleeve of my coat and dragged me toward the service corridor, away from the elevators, away from the marble, and pushed me through the heavy metal door of the fire escape. The stairwell was concrete and cold, smelling of stale air and cleaning chemicals. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed above us. This was where she brought the trash. And apparently this was where she brought her father. She let go of my arm and wiped her hand on her pants, a reflex of disgust she couldn't control. "Are you insane?" she screamed, her voice echoing up the stairwell. "Do you have any idea how hard I have worked to build my brand? I am a self-made woman, Dad. My entire platform is based on luxury, elegance, and success. Self-made," I repeated quietly. "Serena, I paid for your college. I paid for your first 3 flips. I introduced you to the investors who backed this building." She waved her hand dismissively, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "That is ancient history. My followers do not know that. They see a strong, independent woman, and then you show up looking like this. You look like a failure, Dad. And failure is contagious." I lost it all. "Serena," I said, sticking to the story. "The IRS took everything this morning. Marcus kicked me out. I have been walking in the rain for 2 hours. I have nowhere to go." She stared at me. I waited for the daughter I used to read bedtime stories to. I waited for the little girl who used to cry when she scraped her knee. But that girl was gone. In her place was a businesswoman who was calculating the ROI of her own father. "I cannot help you," she said flatly. "You cannot help me?" I asked. "Serena, you own 6 apartment complexes. You have a guest wing in your house that is bigger than my first apartment." "I am renovating," she lied. I could tell it was a lie by the way she touched her necklace. "We are redoing the floors in the guest wing. It is full of dust and fumes." "You cannot stay there." "Then let me sleep on the couch," I begged. "Just for tonight. I am 70 years old, Serena. I am shaking." She took a step back, creating distance between us. "Derek wouldn't like it," she said, using her husband as a shield. "You know how he is. He is very sensitive to smells. And frankly, Dad, you smell like a wet dog and old age. It is depressing. It kills the vibe of the house. We are trying to manifest positivity, and you are bringing a cloud of negativity with you." "Negativity," I said, feeling a bitter laugh bubbling up in my chest. "I am bringing hunger. I am bringing cold. That isn't negativity, Serena. That is reality." "Well, it is not my reality," she retorted. "Look, I have a dinner meeting with a developer from Dubai in 20 minutes. I have to go fix my makeup because I probably look shocked after you ambushed me in my own lobby." She opened her designer purse, a Birkin bag that cost more than a year of college tuition. I thought for a fleeting second she was going to pull out a checkbook, or cash, or maybe a key to one of her empty properties. Instead, she pulled out a small, glossy business card. She held it out to me with 2 fingers. "Here," she said. I took it. I looked down at the card. It wasn't her card. It was a card for the Sunrise Shelter on 4th Street. "What is this?" I asked, looking up at her. "It is a shelter," she said, checking her reflection in the glass of the fire extinguisher case. "I did a charity gala for them last year. They are decent. They have soup, and I think they give out blankets. It is really on brand for them to help people in your bracket." "My bracket," I whispered. "Yes," she said, reaching for the door handle to go back into her world of gold and glass. "Just go there tonight. And Dad, please do not come back to the office until you have showered and bought some new clothes. If you need money, ask Marcus. He is the liquid one." "My assets are all tied up in investments. Marcus gave me $20, I said. "Well, that should be enough for a taxi to the shelter," she said. "Use it." She opened the door. The warmth of the lobby spilled into the stairwell for a second, teasing me. "Bye, Dad," she said. "Good luck with the IRS thing. I really hope it doesn't leak to the press. That would be a PR nightmare for me." She stepped through and let the heavy door slam shut in my face. I was alone again, standing in a concrete stairwell holding a card for a homeless shelter given to me by a daughter who was wearing a $10,000 suit. I looked at the card. Sunrise Shelter, hope for the hopeless. I let out a breath that fogged in the cold air. They thought I was hopeless. They thought I was finished. Serena thought she was protecting her brand. She had no idea she had just destroyed it. I didn't take the elevator down. I walked down the 45 flights of stairs. My hip burned with every step of fire that fueled my anger. With every landing I descended, I made a promise. I would survive this night. And when I rose back up, I wouldn't just be manifesting abundance. I would be manifesting justice. I pushed open the exit door at the bottom of the stairwell and stepped back out into the alley. The rain had stopped, but the wind was cutting. I had been rejected by the banker. I had been rejected by the real estate mogul. I had one card left to play, one child left to visit. Jamal, my youngest. The disappointment. The one who lived in the part of town where the street lights didn't work and the police sirens were the lullaby. The son I had practically disowned because he chose to teach history to poor kids instead of making millions. I gripped the shelter card in one hand and Marcus's $20 bill in the other. I started walking south. I wasn't going to the shelter. I was going to the slums. I was going to see if the son with the least in his pocket had the most in his heart, or if I was truly completely alone in this world. The walk was long, but my resolve was stronger than the cold. I was about to find out who my real family was. The wind had turned into something living, a beast with icy claws that scratched at the exposed skin of my neck. I left the financial district behind, the towering glass structures fading into the gloom like monuments to a civilization that had rejected me. The further I walked south, the darker the streets became. The smooth pavement gave way to cracked concrete where weeds poked through like stubborn fingers. The golden streetlights of Serena's block were replaced by flickering sodium bulbs that cast a sickly yellow nausea over everything. I kept walking one painful step after another. My hip was screaming now, a hot, grinding agony that radiated down my leg. It was the same hip I had injured falling off a scaffolding in 1982, back when I was working 16-hour days to build the foundation of the empire my children had just kicked me out of. I passed a row of boarded-up storefronts. In the reflection of a broken window, I caught a glimpse of myself. I stopped. The man staring back wasn't the CEO of Carter Shipping. He wasn't the man who made the cover of Fortune magazine. He was a ghost, a wet, shivering, pathetic ghost. Is this what I built? I asked the reflection. Is this the legacy of Desmond Carter? I wasn't talking about the company. I was talking about them, Marcus and Serena. As I walked, the memories didn't come as a flood, but as jagged shards of glass. I remembered the day Marcus got rejected from his first choice of university. He had thrown a tantrum in the kitchen, sweeping a vase off the counter. He didn't study, he had screamed. He didn't want to work for it. So what did I do? I didn't tell him to try harder. I didn't tell him to accept failure. I picked up my checkbook. I wrote a check for $50,000 to the university's building fund. I bought his way in. I taught him that rules were for poor people and that obstacles could be dissolved with ink and paper. I remembered Serena's first real estate venture. She had bought a duplex that was sinking into the mud. She hadn't done her due diligence. She was going to lose everything. She called me crying, saying her life was over. Did I let her fail? Did I let her learn the hard lesson of bankruptcy that makes a business owner sharp? No. I quietly bought the property from her through a shell company for double what it was worth. She thought she was a genius. She thought she had the Midas touch. I never told her it was my gold she was touching. I clenched my fists in my pockets. I hadn't raised children. I had raised parasites. I had fed them my own blood and sweat until they were fat and strong, and now that I was pretending to be dry, they were looking for a new host. I had created monsters, and now those monsters were hunting me. The cold was seeping into my brain, making my thoughts sluggish. I stopped under the awning of a closed pawn shop to get out of the drizzle. My hand went to the inside pocket of my coat. I felt the hard plastic of the phone, not the burner phone, the real one, the satellite phone I kept for emergencies. It would be so easy. I could take it out right now. I could dial Harrison, my lawyer. In 20 minutes, a black SUV would pull up to this curb. The heater would be blasting. There would be a thermos of hot coffee and a soft blanket. I could go to the Four Seasons, order a steak, and sleep in a bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. I could end this nightmare. I could declare Marcus and Serena dead to me and spend the rest of my days on a yacht in the Mediterranean. My thumb hovered over the power button. I was so tired. I was so incredibly tired of the cold and the rejection. Why was I doing this? Why was I punishing myself? I knew the answer. I knew who Marcus and Serena were now. The experiment was a success in the most tragic way possible. But then I thought of Jamal with his frayed sweaters and his eyes that always looked a little sad. Jamal, who I had called a fool for wanting to teach history in a public school where the textbooks were 20 years old. Jamal, who hadn't asked me for a dime in 10 years. If I called the lawyer now, I would never know. I would never know if the rot had spread to him too. Was he just quiet, or was he waiting for me to die like the others? Was his distance a sign of integrity, or just a different kind of resentment? I couldn't stop now. I had to know. If Jamal turned me away, then I would know that I had truly failed as a father. I would know that the Carter bloodline was poison. I pushed the phone back into my pocket. I wouldn't call. Not yet. I stepped back out into the rain. I had to keep moving. If I stopped, the cold would win. I turned the corner onto 5th Street. This was bad territory. The shadows here were longer, deeper. I could hear the distant sound of a siren wailing, a sound that never really stopped in this part of town. I heard footsteps behind me. They were faint at first, splashing in the puddles. I quickened my pace, limping harder. The footsteps quickened too. I didn't turn around. I knew the rhythm of the street. I knew what was coming. "Hey, Pops." The voice was young, confident, and sharp. I stopped. There was no point in running. My running days were 30 years behind me. I turned around slowly. There were 3 of them. Teenagers, maybe 18 or 19. Hoods up, hands in their pockets. They moved with the casual menace of predators who knew their prey had no teeth. "You lost, old man?" the one in the middle asked. He was wearing a red hoodie, his face obscured by shadow. "I am just walking," I said, keeping my voice level. I was a CEO. I had stared down union bosses and hostile takeovers. I wouldn't cower before 3 boys. "You are walking in the wrong place," the boy on the left said. He stepped closer. "You gotta pay the toll to walk on this block." "I do not have anything," I said. The boy in the red hoodie laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Everybody got something. Watch, phone, wallet. Let's see it." He stepped into my personal space. I could smell stale tobacco and cheap cologne. He shoved my shoulder. It wasn't a hard shove, but on the slick pavement with my bad hip it was enough. I stumbled back, my arms flailing, and hit the wet concrete hard. Pain exploded in my hip, a white-hot flash that took my breath away. I lay there in the mud, gasping. "Check him," Red Hoodie said. I felt hands rifling through my pockets. They were rough, impatient. "Man, this guy is a bum," one of them said, pulling out the burner phone. "This piece of junk is worth $10. "Wait, look at this," the third one said. He had found it. The crumpled $20 bill Marcus had given me. The severance package. $20, the boy scoffed. "That is it. That is all you got, old man?" "It is all I have," I wheezed, trying to sit up. "Please, that is for food." Red Hoodie looked at the bill, then at me. He spat on the ground next to my face. "Pathetic," he muttered. He pocketed the $20. He pocketed the burner phone. "You are lucky we do not break your legs just for wasting our time," he said. They turned and walked away, laughing, their silhouettes fading into the mist. I lay in the mud, the rain washing over my face. I closed my eyes. They had taken the cash. They had taken the phone. I was now truly, completely alone, but they hadn't found everything. I focused on my right foot. I wiggled my toes inside the ruined shoe. I could feel the stiff edge of a card pressing against my soul. My black card. The Centurion card made of anodized titanium. No limit. I could buy this entire city block with that piece of metal. I could have pulled it out, flashed it, told them who I was. I could have bought their loyalty, or at least their fear. But I didn't. I lay there feeling the hard metal against my foot. It was a lifeline, but it was also a shackle. If I used it, I failed. If I used it, I admitted that Desmond Carter was nothing without his money. I gritted my teeth and rolled onto my side. I pushed myself up, groaning as the pain tore through my body. I was covered in mud. My coat was heavy with water. I had $0 in my pocket. Marcus's $20 was gone. The last link to my old life was severed. I stood up, swaying like a drunkard. I looked south. Jamal lived 10 blocks away. 10 blocks of hell. I started walking again. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't acting. I was a hungry, hurt, broke old man limping through the slums. The reality of it crashed down on me. This is what it felt like to be invisible. This is what it felt like to be prey. And Jamal lived in this every day. A strange feeling rose in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity mixed with a desperate hope. If Jamal could survive this, if he could live in this darkness and still be the boy I remembered, then maybe there was something in him that I had never understood. I dragged my left leg forward. 9 blocks, 8 blocks. The wind howled, mocking me. "You are nothing," it whispered. "You are just a man in the mud." "No," I whispered back, clutching my empty pockets. "I am a father coming home." I just prayed that the door I was walking toward wouldn't be slammed in my face like the others, because if it was, I knew I wouldn't have the strength to get up from the mud a second time. The elevator in Jamal's building had been out of order for 3 weeks. A handwritten sign taped to the metal doors simply read, "Broken," with a sad face drawn in marker. I stood in the lobby, water dripping from the hem of my coat onto the cracked linoleum, staring at the stairwell door. I was on the ground floor. Jamal lived on the 6th. My hip was throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache that seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat. Every part of my body was screaming for rest. I had been rejected by a millionaire banker. I had been thrown out by a real estate mogul. I had been robbed by teenagers. And now I had to climb 6 flights of stairs to beg for mercy from the son I had disappointed the most. I started the climb. The stairwell was narrow and smelled of stale cigarette smoke and bleach. Graffiti covered the walls, a chaotic tapestry of names and dates. I gripped the rusty handrail, pulling myself up 1 step at a time. 1, 2, 3. I had to stop on the 3rd landing to catch my breath, leaning my forehead against the cold concrete wall. I remembered the last time I saw Jamal. It was 6 months ago. He had come to my office to ask for a donation for his school's history department. They needed new textbooks. I had laughed. I told him that if he wanted money, he should have gotten a real job instead of babysitting other people's children for pennies. I told him I wouldn't subsidize his poor life choices. He had left without a word, his shoulders slumped. Now here I was, dragging my broken body up the stairs to his doorstep. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. I finally reached the 6th floor. I stood outside apartment 6B. The door was peeling, the blue paint chipping away to reveal the cheap wood underneath. I could hear the faint sound of a television inside and the low murmur of voices. I raised my hand to knock. My fist hovered in the air. I was terrified. If Jamal turned me away, if he looked at me with the same disgust as Chloe, or the same indifference as Serena, I knew I wouldn't survive the night. I would just lie down in this hallway and let the cold take me. I knocked. 3 soft raps. The voices inside stopped. I heard footsteps. Not the heavy, angry stomp of Marcus. Not the sharp, hurried clicking of Serena's heels. These were soft, shuffling steps. The peephole darkened. Then the chain rattled and the lock turned. The door opened. Jamal stood there. He was wearing a gray sweater that had holes in the elbows and sweatpants that had seen better days. His eyes were red-rimmed, dark circles carved deep beneath them. He held a red pen in one hand and a stack of student essays in the other. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from working too hard for too little. He looked at me. He didn't look at the mud on my coat. He didn't look at the hole in my shoe. He didn't wrinkle his nose at the smell of the rain and the streets that clung to me. He looked right into my eyes. "Dad," he breathed. The word hung in the air, soft and fragile. I opened my mouth to speak, to launch into my rehearsed lie about the IRS and the bankruptcy, but my voice failed me. My lip trembled. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Jamal dropped the papers. They scattered across the floor, but he didn't care. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't a polite hug. It was a desperate, protective embrace. He pulled me into his chest, ignoring the wet grime of my coat soaking into his sweater. "Dad, you are freezing," he said, his voice thick with panic. "Oh my God, you are soaking wet. Come in right now." He pulled me inside and kicked the door shut behind us. Maya, get the towels. It is Dad." Maya appeared from the small kitchen. She was 7 months pregnant, her belly swelling beneath a faded floral dress. She looked tired too, her hair tied up in a messy bun, but the moment she saw me, her face softened into pure concern. "Mr. Carter." She gasped. She didn't ask why I was there at 11 o'clock at night. She didn't ask why I looked like a beggar. She waddled over as fast as she could, grabbing a towel from the back of a chair. "Get him out of that coat, Jamal," she ordered, her voice gentle but firm. I will put the kettle on. We need to get his temperature up. Jamal peeled the wet coat off my shoulders. He knelt down my son, the man I had called a failure, and untied my muddy, ruined shoes. He didn't flinch as he touched them. He slid them off my feet and rubbed my freezing ankles with his warm hands. Sit down, Dad. Please, take the armchair. I collapsed into the armchair. It was old, the fabric worn thin on the armrests, but it felt like a throne. The apartment was tiny. It was essentially one room with a kitchenette in the corner. Books were stacked everywhere, history books, novels, encyclopedias. The walls were covered in photos. Not of expensive vacations or cars, but of smiling students of their wedding day, a wedding I had skipped because I had a board meeting. It was small, it was cluttered, but it was warm. It smelled of cinnamon tea and old paper. It smelled like a home. Jamal pulled a dining chair close to me and sat down, leaning forward, his hands on his knees. Dad, what happened? He asked. We tried to call you last week for your birthday, but the number was disconnected. What is going on? I took a shaky breath. I had to say the words. I had to test him, even though it was breaking my heart to lie to him now. I lost it all, Jamal, I whispered. The IRS. Fraud investigation. They froze the accounts this morning. They took the house. They took the cars. I have nothing. I am bankrupt. I watched his face closely. I waited for the flash of anger. I waited for him to ask about his inheritance. I waited for him to ask how this would affect the baby's future. But his expression didn't change. He just reached out and took my cold, callous hand in his. Okay, he said. Just okay. I have nowhere to go, son, I continued. Marcus kicked me out. Serena wouldn't even let me in the door. A shadow passed over Jamal's face, a flash of anger, but it wasn't directed at me. He squeezed my hand tighter. You are not going anywhere, he said firmly. You are staying right here. But Jamal, I said, looking around the tiny room. You do not have space. The baby is coming. You barely have enough for yourselves. I do not want to be a burden. Stop, he said. You are not a burden. You are my father. We will figure it out. It might be a little tight, but we will make it work. Maya walked over with a steaming mug of tea. She placed it in my hands. Her fingers were warm. Drink this, Mr. Carter, she said. It is ginger and honey. It will help with the chill. I took a sip. The heat spread through my chest, melting the ice around my heart. We do not have much, Dad, Jamal said, his voice apologetic. But what we have is yours. We can clear off the bookshelf to make room for your things. And I can pick up some extra tutoring shifts on the weekends. We will be fine. He stood up and looked at the only bed in the apartment. It was a double bed pushed against the far wall. Maya, help me with the sheets, he said. We need to change them for Dad. I choked on my tea. No, I said, trying to stand up. No, absolutely not. I will sleep on the floor, or the chair. I am not taking your bed. You have a pregnant wife, Jamal. I cannot take her bed. Dad, sit down, Jamal said, gently pushing me back into the chair. You are 70 years old and you have been walking in the rain for hours. You are taking the bed. But where will you sleep? I asked. Maya smiled, smoothing her hand over her belly. We have the camping mattress. It is actually really comfortable. It is good for my back, honestly. The soft mattress hurts my hips lately. It was a lie. A kind, beautiful lie. I knew that floor was hard. I knew sleeping on it would be agony for a woman 7 months pregnant. But she said it with a smile so I wouldn't feel guilty. I watched them. I watched my son and his wife strip their own bed, putting on fresh pillowcases for me. I watched them drag a thin foam mat out of the closet and lay it on the floor between the kitchen counter and the bookshelf. They moved in sync without arguing, without complaining. Marcus had 5 empty bedrooms and put me in a garage. Serena had a guest wing and put me in a stairwell. Jamal had 1 room and he gave me his bed. Tears finally spilled over my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. I lowered my head, hiding my face in the steam of the tea. Dad, are you okay? Jamal asked, rushing back to my side. Are you in pain? Do we need to go to the hospital? I shook my head, unable to speak. I reached out and grabbed his arm, gripping the rough wool of his sweater. I am just tired, son, I managed to say. Then rest, he said softly. You are safe here. Nobody is going to turn you away. He helped me stand up. He guided me to the bed as if I were made of glass. I laid down on the mattress. It smelled of lavender detergent, cheap detergent, Not the imported French stuff Chloe used, but it smelled better. It smelled of peace. Jamal pulled the duvet up to my chin. "Good night, Dad," he said. "We are right here if you need anything." He turned off the main light, leaving only a small reading lamp on his desk. I lay there in the semi-darkness. I watched Jamal and Maya settle onto the thin foam mat on the floor. I saw Jamal wrap his arm around Maya, pulling her close, whispering something in her ear that made her giggle softly. They had nothing. The paint was peeling. The faucet in the kitchen was dripping. They were worried about money. I could see it in the stack of bills on the counter. But they had everything I had spent my life trying to buy and failed. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. Not yet. I listened to the sound of my son's breathing. I thought about the checkbook hidden in the lining of my coat. I thought about the $75 million sitting in my trust fund. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would rewrite the destiny of this family. But for tonight, I needed to learn one last lesson. I needed to see just how far they would go to keep me alive. I drifted off to sleep with a heavy heart, knowing that the hardest part of my plan was yet to come. Because to save my family, I had to let my best son suffer for just a little while longer, and that guilt was heavier than any rain-soaked coat. I sat there in the worn armchair, the warmth of the ginger tea seeping into my cold hands, but the chill in my heart was harder to dislodge. Jamal was sitting on the edge of the mattress, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, watching me with an intensity that made me want to look away. I had just dropped the bomb. I had told him the lie that I had rehearsed for weeks. I told him that Carter Shipping was gone. I told him the assets were frozen, the house was seized, and that his father, the great tycoon Desmond Carter, was now a pauper with nothing but the wet clothes on his back. I waited for the recriminations. I braced myself for the anger. I expected him to ask how I could be so stupid or why I hadn't hidden money offshore like he always assumed rich people did. I expected him to panic about how he would support a baby with a bankrupt grandfather hanging around his neck. But Jamal didn't blink. He didn't sigh. He didn't run his hands through his hair in frustration the way Marcus did when the stock market dipped 0.5%. Instead, he reached out and put a hand on my knee. His grip was firm, grounding. "Dad, look at me," he said, his voice steady. I looked up, meeting his eyes. They were dark and kind, so different from the cold, calculating eyes of his siblings. "It is just money, Dad," he said softly. "It is just paper and numbers. You built it once. Maybe you will build it again. But even if you do not, it does not matter. You are here. You are safe. You are breathing. That is the only asset I care about." The air left my lungs in a rush. I had spent 40 years believing that my value to my children was measured in zero balances and trust funds. I thought I was their ATM, their safety net, their golden goose. And for Marcus and Serena, I was right. But here was Jamal, the son I had criticized for being too soft, telling me that I was enough just as I was. "But Jamal," I stammered, sticking to the script, even though it tasted like ash in my mouth. "I have nothing to give you. I cannot help with the baby. I cannot pay for a nursery. I am a burdened son. I am just another mouth to feed." Jamal shook his head, a small, sad smile playing on his lips. "You are my father," he said simply. "You carried me when I was small. Now I carry you. That is how it works. We do not have much, Dad. You can see that. But as long as I have a roof, you have a roof. As long as we have food you eat. We are a family. We do not leave people behind." He stood up then, clapping his hands together as if to dispel the heavy atmosphere. "Now let's get you something solid to eat," he said. "Maya is making her famous vegetable soup. It is not exactly a steak dinner, but it warms the soul." I watched him walk toward the kitchenette where Maya was stirring a small pot on the electric burner. The smell of onions and broth filled the tiny apartment. It was a humble smell, but after the night I had endured, it smelled better than the finest French cuisine. As Jamal moved, my eyes wandered around the room. I was a man trained to notice details. I noticed the water stain on the ceiling. I noticed the stack of unpaid utility bills on the counter, weighed down by a jar of pennies. And then I saw it. It was stuck to the refrigerator door with a magnet shaped like a smiling sun, a bright red piece of paper. The bold black letters at the top were unmistakable even from across the room. Eviction notice. Final warning. My heart hammered against my ribs. I squinted. The date. They had 3 days. 3 days to pay $2,000 or the sheriff would come and put their belongings on the street. My son was 3 days away from being homeless. He had a pregnant wife. He had zero money. And yet when his father showed up claiming to be bankrupt, he opened the door wide. He didn't hesitate. He didn't say, "Sorry, Dad, we are drowning too." He just pulled me onto the lifeboat even though it was already taking on water. Jamal turned around to get bowls from the cupboard and caught me staring at the fridge. His eyes followed my gaze. He saw the red paper. Panic flashed across his face. Pure, unadulterated panic. Not because he was caught being poor, but because he didn't want me to worry. He didn't want the bankrupt old man to feel like a burden. He moved quickly, crossing the room in 2 strides. He snatched the paper off the fridge, crumbling it into a ball in his fist before shoving it deep into his pocket. He turned to me, a forced smile plastered on his face. Just junk mail," he stammered. "You know how they are. Always trying to sell you credit cards or insurance. It is nothing." He was lying to protect me, just as I was lying to test him. The difference was, his lie was born of love. Mine was born of suspicion. Maya turned from the stove, holding the pot with a kitchen towel. "Soup is ready," she announced, her voice cheerful, though I could see the fatigue etched around her eyes. She brought the pot to the small, scratched wooden table. She set down 3 bowls, but she only ladled soup into 1. My bowl. It wasn't a thick, hearty stew. It was mostly broth with floating pieces of carrots, potatoes, and celery. But as she scraped the bottom of the pot, she found the few pieces of chicken's small, shredded bits that were clearly leftovers from a previous meal. She carefully, deliberately scooped every single piece of meat into my bowl. "Maya," I said, watching her, "what about you? What about Jamal? You are eating for 2. She smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, do not worry about us, Mr. Carter," she lied effortlessly. "We ate earlier, before you came. We had a huge dinner. I am actually stuffed." She looked at Jamal. "Right, honey, we are full." Jamal nodded vigorously, sitting down opposite me with an empty glass of water. "Absolutely," he said. "I had a big sandwich on the way home. I could not eat another bite." "Go ahead, Dad. Eat. You need the strength." I looked down at the bowl. The steam rose up, warming my face. I looked at the pieces of chicken. I knew with the certainty of a man who knows the price of everything that this was all the food they had in the house. They were starving. I picked up the spoon. My hand was trembling again, not from cold this time, but from a crushing sense of humility. I took a sip. It was salty and hot. I chewed on a piece of carrot. It was delicious. I ate slowly, feeling their eyes on me. They watched me eat with a look of satisfaction, as if my nourishment was feeding them. And then the room fell silent. In that silence, a sound erupted. A low, guttural growl. It was loud. It was unmistakable. It came from Jamal's stomach. The sound echoed in the small apartment, a traitorous protest against his lie. Jamal froze. His face turned a deep shade of crimson. He pressed his hand against his stomach, trying to silence it, trying to laugh it off. "Whoops," he said, his voice cracking. Must be digestion. That sandwich was pretty spicy." Maya looked down at her hands, biting her lip to hide her own hunger. I stopped eating. I held the spoon midair. I looked at my son. I saw the hollows in his cheeks. I saw the way his eyes involuntarily flickered to my bowl every time I lifted the spoon. He hadn't eaten a sandwich. He hadn't eaten anything. He was giving his father the last of his food while his own body screamed for sustenance. And he was doing it with a smile, terrified that I might feel guilty if I knew the truth. I felt a lump in my throat that no soup could wash away. I had spent my life surrounded by people who wanted to take from me. Marcus wanted my capital. Serena wanted my connections. My business partners wanted my market share. But here in this crumbling apartment with peeling paint and an eviction notice on the fridge, I had found the only 2 people in the world who wanted to give to me, even when they had nothing left to give. I wanted to throw the spoon down. I wanted to reach into my boot, pull out the black titanium card, and order a feast from the finest steakhouse in the city. I wanted to pay their rent for the next 5 years. I wanted to scream the truth. But I couldn't. Not yet. The test wasn't over. As cruel as it felt, I needed to see how far this would go. I needed to see what they would do tomorrow when the sun rose and the reality of another day without money set in. So I swallowed the lump in my throat. I forced myself to take another bite of the soup. It is delicious, Jamal, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Glad you like it, Dad, he whispered, clutching his growling stomach. I finished the bowl. Every spoonful felt like a debt I could never repay. I scraped the bottom, leaving nothing. When I was done, Jamal took the bowl to the sink. You should get some sleep now, Dad, he said. We have a big day tomorrow. We will figure this out. Together. He turned off the kitchen light. The apartment plunged into shadow. I lay back on the mattress, listening to the rain tap against the window. I thought about the eviction notice. I thought about the growl of my son's stomach. They were willing to starve for me. Tomorrow I would find out if they were willing to sacrifice the only thing of value they had left. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, I prayed. I prayed that I was worthy of the son I had neglected for so long. And I swore on the grave of my wife that Marcus and Serena would pay for every single pang of hunger Jamal felt tonight. They would pay with interest. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. The silence in the room was heavy, pressurized by the kind of anxiety that only poor people know. The kind of anxiety that sits on your chest like a bag of wet cement when the lights go out. I lay on Jamal's bed, staring up at a water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of a country I didn't recognize. The sheets smelled of lavender and sunshine, a stark contrast to the storm that was still raging inside my head. I kept my breathing slow and rhythmic, the deep, heavy breathing of an old man in a deep sleep. But I wasn't sleeping. Every nerve ending in my body was awake. I was listening. A few feet away, separated only by a thin partition of books and shadows, my son and his wife were lying on a foam camping mat on the hard floor. I could hear the rustle of their blanket. I could hear the soft, rhythmic wheeze of the refrigerator compressor kicking on and off. And then I heard the whispers. They were trying so hard to be quiet. They were terrified of waking me, the bankrupt burden who had crashed into their lives. Jamal Maya's voice was barely a breath. It was trembling. Did you see his shoes? He had holes in them. He was walking on his skin. I know, baby, Jamal whispered back. I saw. He ate the whole bowl of soup, she said. He was starving. When was the last time he had a real meal? I squeezed my eyes shut. I had eaten their dinner. I had taken the food from a pregnant woman's mouth. Jamal Maya continued, and I could hear the shift in her tone. It was the shift from sympathy to survival. We have a problem. I checked the jar. We have $42. That is it. That is everything until your paycheck hits on Friday. And Friday is 4 days away. There was a silence, a long, painful silence where the only sound was the wind rattling the window pane. I can make it stretch, Maya whispered, but her voice cracked. I can buy rice and beans. But Jamal, the rent, the eviction notice. We needed that $2,000 by Wednesday. We were going to ask for an extension, but now we have your dad. We will figure it out, Jamal said. His voice was low, but there was a steeliness to it that I hadn't heard before. How Jamal Maya asked, desperation leaking into her whisper. How do we figure this out? We cannot feed 3 adults on $40 for 4 days, and we definitely cannot pay the landlord. If we get kicked out, where do we go? The shelter, with a newborn coming. And now with your dad. We are not going to a shelter, Jamal said fiercely. And we are not kicking him out. Did you see his face, Maya? Did you see how broken he looked? Marcus threw him out. Serena turned him away. I am not doing that. I do not care if we have to eat sawdust. He stays. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I wanted to sit up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that I could buy this entire apartment building with the change in my pocket. But I couldn't. I had to know. I had to know how far they would go. So, what do we do? Maya asked softly. I have an idea, Jamal said. I was thinking about it while he was eating. What is it? The bike, Jamal said. I froze. The bike. His 2015 Honda motorcycle. It wasn't a luxury item. It was his legs. It was how he got to the high school across town where he taught. It was how he picked up extra tutoring shifts. It was his freedom. You cannot sell the bike, Maya hissed. How will you get to work? The bus doesn't run that early to the south side. I will walk, Jamal said. Or I will run. It is only 10 miles. I can do it. 10 miles, Jamal. Each way. In this weather. I have done harder things, he said. I checked the prices online. I can get $1,500 for it if I sell it quick to the guy at the pawn shop on 5th. It is low, but it is cash. That covers most of the rent. We can beg the landlord for the last $500. Jamal. No, Maya said, and I could hear tears in her voice. You love that bike, and you are working double shifts. You will collapse if you have to walk 20 miles a day. I will survive, he said. Dad needs a roof. He needs time to get back on his feet. If selling the bike buys him a month of safety, then it is worth it. I lay there, the tears finally leaking out of my closed eyes, sliding hot and fast into the pillow. I had judged him. God help me, I had judged him. For 10 years, I looked at Jamal and saw a man with no ambition. I saw a man who settled for a teacher's salary when he could have been running a division of my company. I thought he was weak. I thought he lacked the killer instinct that made a man successful. I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. Marcus had the killer instinct. He would kill his own father for a profit. Serena had ambition. She would climb over my dead body to get a better view. But Jamal had something I had forgotten about. He had honor. He had the kind of strength that doesn't roar, it endures. He was willing to walk 20 miles a day in the rain so I wouldn't have to sleep in it. But Maya wasn't done. No, she whispered. We are not selling the bike. You need it to keep the job. If you lose the job, we lose everything. Then what do we do? Jamal asked, sounding defeated. There was a rustling sound. I strained my ears. It sounded like metal sliding against skin. We sell these, Maya said. The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched out for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Maya Jamal's voice broke. No, not the rings. They are just gold. Jamal, she whispered. They are just metal bands. We bought them at a pawn shop, remember? They are not even fancy. They are everything, Jamal said, his voice thick with emotion. I put that on your finger when I promised to take care of you. I promised you I would never take it off. You are taking care of me, she said soothingly. You are taking care of us. You are showing our son what it means to be a good man, a good son. Jamal, your father was a billionaire once, right? And now he has nothing. That proves that money disappears. But this, what we are doing, this is real. I can get $500 for mine, she continued. Maybe $400 for yours. That is almost $1,000. It buys us food. It buys us time. We can keep the bike. You can keep working. Jamal was crying now. I could hear the suppressed sobs, the way his breath hitched in his chest. I am sorry, Maya, he choked out. I am so sorry. You deserve diamonds. You deserve a mansion like Chloe has. And I am making you sell your wedding ring to feed my dad. I am a failure. I clenched my fists under the duvet until my knuckles turned white. No, son. You are not the failure. I am. I am the failure because I let you think that diamonds equal worth. I let you think that a mansion equals success. Maya's voice became fierce protective. Don't you ever say that, she whispered. Do not look at Chloe. Do not look at Serena. They are poor, Jamal. They are so poor. They have money, but they have nothing else. Look at how they treated him. They are empty. You are the richest man I know. And I would rather walk around with a bare finger and a full heart than have a diamond the size of a rock and a soul like a stone. I heard a soft clink. The sound of a ring being placed on a nightstand. Then another clink. We sell them tomorrow morning, Maya said. First thing, before he wakes up. I do not want him to know. If he knows, he will leave. He has too much pride. He will go back to the street to save us. We have to tell him. Tell him you got an advance on your paycheck. Jamal let out a long, shuddering breath. Okay. We sell the rings. Come here, she whispered. The rustling stopped. The apartment settled back into the hum of the refrigerator and the wind. I lay in the dark, staring at the water stain which was now blurry through my tears. I felt a pain in my chest that was sharper than any heart attack. It was the pain of a heart breaking open, shedding the callus of greed and arrogance that had encased it for decades. I thought about the $75 million. I thought about the power I held. I could fix this. I could fix it all in a second. But I knew I couldn't do it yet. The script had to play out. I needed to let them walk into that pawn shop. I needed to let them place those rings on the counter. Because that act, that sacrifice, it was the final seal. It was the proof that would stand against Marcus and Serena forever. but I swore a silent oath to the water stain on the ceiling. I swore that for every second those rings were off their fingers, I would give them a year of paradise. I would buy them the world. I would make Jamal the king he didn't know he was. And as for Marcus and Serena, listening to the sacrifice of my poorest son made the rage against my richest children turn into something cold and absolute. They hadn't just rejected me. They had rejected the very humanity that Jamal was stripping himself bare to protect. I closed my eyes, feigning sleep, while my son and his wife held each other on the floor, ringless and terrified, but together. I was the beggar billionaire, but tonight, lying in my son's bed, I knew I was the one who was truly being saved. The sun hadn't even cracked the horizon when the floorboards creaked. I was lying on the mattress, feigning the deep, rhythmic breathing of an old man in a slumber, but my eyes were cracked open just a sliver. The apartment was freezing. The heat had turned off sometime during the night to save money, and the air was thick with the gray light of dawn. I watched Jamal tiptoe around the room. He was moving like a ghost, terrified of making a sound. He pulled on his work trousers, the ones with the frayed hem, and buttoned a shirt that had been ironed so many times the fabric was shiny. He didn't make coffee. Coffee cost money. He just splashed cold water on his face at the sink and dried it with a paper towel. Maya was already awake, sitting up on the floor wrapped in the blanket. I saw them exchange a look. It was a look of pure devastation. Jamal reached into his pocket and pulled out the 2 gold bands, the wedding rings. He held them in his palm for a long moment, staring at them as if he were memorizing their weight, their shape, the way they caught the little bit of light coming through the window. "I love you," he whispered to Maya. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Do it quickly, before he wakes up." Jamal nodded. He slipped the rings into his pocket, grabbed his bag, and opened the door. He paused for a second, looking back at me sleeping on his bed. His expression wasn't angry. It was apologetic. He felt guilty for leaving me even though he was leaving to save me. The latch clicked shut. I waited exactly 10 seconds. Then I threw off the duvet. My hip was stiff, sending a jolt of pain up my spine as I stood, but adrenaline is a powerful painkiller. I grabbed my coat still damp from the storm and shoved my feet into the ruined shoes. I didn't have time to be the old man. I had to be the spy. I hurried out into the hallway. The elevator was still broken. I could hear Jamal's footsteps echoing 3 flights down. I moved as fast as I could, gripping the railing, practically sliding down the stairs. I hit the street just as Jamal was turning the corner at the end of the block. He wasn't heading toward the bus stop that led to his school. He was walking in the opposite direction, toward 5th Street, toward the strip of payday loan sharks, liquor stores, and pawn shops. I followed him. I kept a safe distance, pulling my collar up to hide my face. The morning fog was heavy, which helped. I watched my son walk. He didn't walk with the confident stride of a man going to work. He walked with his head down, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, protecting the only capital he had left. We passed a bakery. The smell of fresh bread wafted out. I saw Jamal slow down. He looked through the window at the trays of donuts and bagels. His hand went to his stomach. He was starving, but he didn't stop. He swallowed hard and kept walking. He stopped in front of a shop with yellow metal bars on the windows and a neon sign that buzzed with a dying electrical hum. "Quick cash pawn. We buy gold." Jamal stood outside for a full minute. He was building up the courage. He looked at his hand, checking his finger where the ring used to be. He rubbed the pale band of skin that was now exposed to the cold air. Then he pushed the door open and went in. I moved closer. I couldn't go in or I would blow my cover. But the shop had a large, grimy plate glass window. I stood in the shadow of the doorway next door and peered through the glass past the displays of stolen stereos and power tools. Jamal was at the counter. The man behind the glass was a heavy-set guy with grease in his hair and eyes like a shark. He didn't look up when Jamal approached. He just kept wiping a shotgun with a rag. I saw Jamal pull the rings out of his pocket. He placed them on the rubber mat on the counter. He did it gently, respectfully. The broker picked them up. He didn't treat them with respect. He tossed them onto a small digital scale. He squinted at the number. Then he picked up a jeweler's loupe and stuck it in his eye. He looked at the inside of the bands. He scratched the surface of Maya's ring with a metal file. I saw Jamal flinch. That file was scratching his heart. I couldn't hear them through the glass, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly how this conversation went. I had negotiated billion-dollar mergers. I knew body language. The broker put the loop down. He shook his head. He made a face like the rings were garbage. He held up 3 fingers. $300. Jamal shook his head vigorously. He was arguing. He was gesturing with his hands. I could see him mouthing the words. 14 karat. Vintage. The broker laughed. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He knew he had the power. He knew Jamal was desperate. People don't come into a pawn shop at 7 a.m. unless they are bleeding out financially. The broker held up 2 fingers. 200. Jamal froze. I saw his shoulders slump. He was pleading now. He leaned over the counter. I saw his lips moving fast. I pressed my ear against the cold glass, trying to catch a sound. The street was quiet enough that I could hear the muffled voices through the ventilation grate above the door. Please, Jamal was saying. His voice was cracking. That is a low ball. The gold weight alone is worth 400. My wife is pregnant. My father is sick. He is at my house right now. I need to buy food and medicine. Please, man, just give me 400. The broker didn't blink. 200, the broker said, his voice flat and bored. Take it or I close the register. I got a business to run, kid. I am not a charity. Your daddy's problems ain't my problems. Jamal looked down at the rings. He looked at the $200 the man had slapped on the counter. 2 bills. Just 2 pieces of paper. That was the price of his marriage symbol. That was the price of his dignity. $200 to feed me. I wanted to smash the glass. I wanted to burst in there, grab that broker by the collar, and buy his entire miserable shop just to fire him. I wanted to shake Jamal and tell him, no, don't do it. But I stood frozen. Jamal reached out. His hand was shaking. He picked up the money. He looked at the rings one last time. The broker swept them off the counter and dumped them into a plastic bin filled with other broken dreams. Jamal turned around. I ducked back into the shadows of the doorway, pressing myself against the brick wall. Jamal pushed the door open and stepped out. He didn't look relieved. He looked defeated. He looked at the 2 bills in his hand, then shoved them into his pocket as if they burned him. He started walking back the way he came. He walked past the bakery again. He didn't look at the donuts this time. He couldn't afford a donut. That money was for Desmond. That money was for the bankrupt father. I waited until he was half a block away before I stepped out. I looked at the pawn shop. I memorized the sign. I memorized the address. I memorized the face of the man who had sneered at my son's desperation. I walked up to the window and looked at the plastic bin behind the counter where the rings had landed. They were just metal. Maya was right. They were just gold alloy mixed with copper. But in that bin among the discarded watches and broken chains, they shone brighter than any diamond I had ever seen in a vault. I touched the glass. Keep them safe for me, I whispered to the greedy broker who couldn't hear me. Keep them safe for 24 hours. Because when I come back for them, I am going to buy this whole block and turn it into a parking lot. I turned around and started the long walk back to the apartment. I had to beat Jamal home. I had to be back in that bed pretending to sleep when he walked in with the groceries he bought with his heart. My hip hurt. My feet were wet. But as I walked, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt a fire in my belly. Not the fire of ambition, but the fire of justice. Jamal had just sold his past to secure my present. Tomorrow I would give him his future. But first, I had to eat the food he bought with that money. I had to look him in the eye and let him lie to me about where the money came from. That was the punishment I inflicted on myself. Every bite of that food would taste like guilt, and I would force myself to swallow it all. Because that guilt was the fuel I needed to burn Marcus and Serena to the ground. The sun had gone down hours ago, leaving the city soaked in a bruised purple twilight. Inside Jamal's apartment, the air was thick with the aroma of the groceries he had bought with his wedding ring money. Maya was stirring a pot of chili on the stove. It wasn't fancy. It was ground beef, canned beans, and a lot of chili powder to mask the cheapness of the meat. But to me, sitting in that worn-out armchair with my leg propped up on a milk crate, it smelled like the finest meal I had ever been served. I knew the price of that meal. I knew it cost gold. I knew it cost a promise. We were sitting in a fragile kind of peace. Jamal was telling a story about one of his students who had finally passed a history exam, trying to keep the mood light, trying to pretend that he hadn't just pawned his marriage for a few bags of food. I watched him, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and devastating guilt. I was about to tell him how proud I was. I was about to break character and tell him that he was twice the man I ever was. Then the knock came. It wasn't a polite tap. It wasn't the knock of a neighbor asking for sugar. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding that shook the thin door in its frame. Bam, bam, bam. Jamal froze mid-sentence. Maya turned from the stove, clutching the wooden spoon like a weapon. We all knew that sound. In this neighborhood, a knock like that usually meant the police or a debt collector. Jamal stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his pants. He looked at me, his eyes filled with worry. "Stay there, Dad," he whispered. "I will handle it." He walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. He barely cracked it open before it was shoved wide by a leather-gloved hand. The door banged against the wall, chipping the plaster. And in walked the vultures. It was Marcus. Behind him was Chloe, and trailing in the rear was Serena. They looked like aliens who had crash-landed on a hostile planet. Marcus was wearing a cashmere overcoat that cost more than Jamal's annual salary. Serena was draped in a white fur stole that looked ridiculous in the cramped hallway. And Chloe looked like she had just stepped into a crime scene. She took one step into the apartment and immediately covered her nose with a silk handkerchief. She scanned the room, the peeling wallpaper, the mattress on the floor, the water stain on the ceiling, and her eyes landed on me. "Oh, thank God," she said, her voice muffled by the silk. "He is alive. I told you, Marcus. I told you we had to check. If he died in a gutter tonight, the press would have a field day. Can you imagine the headlines banker's father found frozen?" My social standing would never recover. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I was hungry. She just confirmed that I wasn't a corpse that would inconvenience her social calendar. Marcus stepped in further, kicking a stack of student essays that Jamal had left on the floor near the door. He looked around with a sneer of undisguised contempt. "Jamal," he said, not bothering to say hello, "you actually live like this. I thought you were exaggerating about the neighborhood. This place is a closet." Serena chimed in, refusing to close the door behind her as if she needed an escape route. "It smells like boiled cabbage and desperation in here," she said, wrinkling her perfect nose. "Seriously, Jamal, do you not have air filtration? My asthma is flaring up just standing in the doorway." Jamal stood his ground. He didn't back down. He stepped between them and the kitchen, shielding Maya and me. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" Jamal asked, his voice low and hard. "You kicked him out last night. You slammed the door in his face. Why do you care now? We are here to manage the situation," Marcus said, pulling off his gloves, finger by finger. "We needed to make sure he wasn't wandering. We cannot have him roaming the streets looking like a beggar. It reflects poorly on the family name." The family name, I croaked from the chair. I gripped the armrest to stop my hands from shaking. "You did not care about the family name when you gave me $20 and told me to sleep in a garage." Chloe stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. She looked at me with pity, but it was the cold, distant pity one feels for a roadkill animal. "Desmond, be reasonable," she said. "We have responsibilities. We have investors. We have a reputation. You crashing like this? It is messy. And look at this place." She gestured vaguely at the room. "Oh, Jesus, is that where you are sleeping?" she asked, pointing at the mattress on the floor. "On the floor, like a dog." "Jamal, I knew you were struggling, but I didn't know you were destitute. This is borderline elder abuse." Maya stepped forward then. Her face was flushed from the heat of the stove, but her eyes were blazing. "It is not abuse," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "It is love. We gave him our bed. We are sleeping on the floor. We are feeding him, which is more than any of you did in your mansions with your empty guest rooms." Serena laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Feeding him," she mocked. "With what? That slop on the stove. Please, do not act like you are saints just because you are poor. You are enabling him." She turned to Jamal, her face hardening. "And listen to me, little brother. Just because he is crashing here does not mean you get a payout. Do not think for a second that you can call me or Marcus asking for reimbursement. You chose to take him in. He is your burden now. Do not call me asking for grocery money. Do not call me asking for rent help. I am liquidating assets right now for a project in Dubai, and I have zero cash flow for charity cases." Jamal clenched his fists at his sides. I saw the muscles in his jaw working. "I didn't ask you for anything, Serena," he said. "I never have. And I never will. Get out of my house." "Not yet," Marcus said. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. He didn't pull out a checkbook. He didn't pull out cash. He pulled out a crisp, folded legal document. He walked over to me. He loomed over the chair, blocking the light from the single overhead bulb. Dad, we need to handle the legalities, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. You say the IRS froze everything. You say there is a fraud investigation. That means debt. That means lawsuits. He unfolded the paper and held it out to me. It was thick, expensive paper. What is this? I asked. It is a renunciation of liability and a waiver of inheritance rights, Marcus said smoothly. It basically states that your debts are your own. It separates your financial identity from ours completely. And it states that if any assets are recovered, if there is anything left after the IRS is done, you sign it over to Serena and me to cover the emotional distress and reputational damage you have caused us. I looked at the paper. I looked at my son. You want me to sign away my rights? I whispered. You want me to sign a paper saying I owe you for the damage of being poor? It is standard protection, Dad, Marcus said, uncapping a fountain pen, a Mont Blanc pen I had given him when he got his first promotion. Just sign it. It protects us from your mess. And frankly, it is the least you can do after showing up at my house looking like a hobo and scaring Chloe. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its absolute moral bankruptcy. They weren't just kicking me while I was down. They were trying to carve the meat off my bones before I was even dead. Jamal lunged forward. He slapped the paper out of Marcus's hand. Get away from him, Jamal shouted. He pushed Marcus back, a hard, solid shove to the chest. Marcus stumbled, bumping into Chloe, who let out a shrill scream as if she had been stabbed. Do not touch him, Chloe shrieked. This suit is Italian wool. You are getting grease on it. Get out, Jamal roared. He pointed to the door. Get out of my house. You come in here, you insult my wife, you insult my home, and now you try to trick Dad into signing legal papers. You are sick, all of you. You are sick in the head. Marcus straightened his coat, his face turning red with indignation. Fine, he spat. Have it your way. Rot in this hole together. But mark my words, Jamal. When the sheriff comes to kick you out because I know you are behind on rent, I ran a credit check on you this morning. Do not come crawling to me. Serena stepped toward the door, wrapping her fur tighter around herself. Let's go, Marcus, she said. I cannot breathe in here anyway. It smells like failure. And honestly, looking at them makes me depressed. It is such bad energy. She looked at me one last time. Bye, Dad, she said coldly. Try not to die before the court date. It would be a lot of paperwork. They turned and marched out. Chloe paused at the threshold, looking at the floor where the legal paper lay. You are making a mistake, she said to Jamal. You could have been on the winning side. Now you are just trash. She slammed the door. The silence that followed was ringing. It was the silence of a battlefield after the bombs have stopped falling. Jamal stood there, his chest heaving. He looked at the door, then he looked at me. His eyes were filled with tears, not of sadness, but of rage. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered. I am so sorry you had to hear that. I looked at him. I looked at the legal paper on the floor. I looked at the pot of chili that had gone cold. I stood up. The pain in my hip was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard determination. Do not apologize, son, I said. My voice was different now. It was deeper, stronger. It was the voice of Desmond Carter, the CEO. Pick that paper up, I said. Jamal looked confused. Dad, don't worry about it. I will burn it. No, I said. Pick it up. Keep it. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I saw them getting into Marcus's luxury SUV. I saw the taillights flare red as they sped away from the bad neighborhood. They wanted me to sign away my assets. They wanted to separate themselves from me. I smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. They have no idea, I whispered to the glass. They have absolutely no idea what they just started. I turned back to Jamal and Maya. They were looking at me with concern, thinking the stress had finally broken my mind. Eat your chili, I said gently. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day. I sat back down in the armchair. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the next 6 hours staring at the wall planning. I planned every detail. I planned the venue. I planned the audience. I planned the exact moment I would rip the rug out from under their feet. They had called my son trash. They had called my presence a burden. They had demanded I sign my life away. Tomorrow I would sign something. Oh yes. I would sign the check that would change Jamal's life forever, and I would sign the warrants for their destruction. The vultures had circled, but they forgot one thing. I wasn't a corpse. I was the hunter, and the trap was about to snap shut. The door was still vibrating from where Chloe had slammed it, but the silence inside the apartment didn't last more than a heartbeat. Jamal moved so fast he was a blur. He didn't go to the window to watch them leave. He didn't collapse on the sofa in defeat. He ripped the door open, the wood groaning against its hinges, and stepped out into the hallway. Marcus and Serena were halfway to the elevator, their expensive shoes clicking on the dirty linoleum like a ticking clock. They stopped when they heard the door fly open. They turned around expecting to see a broken man begging for a handout. Instead, they saw a lion. I sat in the armchair, gripping the worn fabric until my knuckles turned white. I had never seen my youngest son look like this. His chest was heaving, his fists were balled at his sides, the veins in his neck were bulging against the collar of his frayed shirt. For 30 years I had thought Jamal was soft. I thought he lacked the fire that burned in the bellies of men like me and Marcus. I thought he was a sheep. I was wrong. He wasn't a sheep. He was a sleeping giant, and they had just made the mistake of waking him up. "Get out!" Jamal roared. His voice echoed off the concrete walls, shaking the dust from the ceiling fixtures. Marcus laughed a dry, condescending sound. "We are leaving, Jamal. Calm down before you give yourself a stroke. We just wanted to make sure the legal paperwork was—" "Shut up," Jamal screamed, cutting him off. "Just shut your mouth, Marcus. For once in your life, stop talking about money and paperwork and listen to me." He took a step toward them. Marcus actually took a step back. The banker, the man who controlled millions, flinched before the schoolteacher. "You stand there in your $4,000 coat," Jamal spat, pointing a shaking finger at his brother. "You stand there and you call him a burden. You call him a mess. You call him trash. Do you have any idea who that man is? Do you? He is a bankrupt old man who made bad decisions," Serena said, rolling her eyes and checking her nails. "He is the man who carried you on his shoulders when you were too tired to walk." Jamal yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "He is the man who sat up with you for 3 nights straight when you had pneumonia, Serena. I remember. I was there. He is the man who worked 18 hours a day on construction sites, breathing in cement dust until his lungs were raw just so you could have piano lessons. Just so you could go to that private school where you learned to look down on people like me." He took another step. "And now he comes to you. He comes to you in the rain. He comes to you hungry. And what do? You give him a garage. You give him a stairwell. You give him a legal waiver to sign so you can protect your precious assets." Jamal's voice dropped to a whisper, a terrifying, trembling whisper. "You are not rich, Marcus. You are the poorest man I have ever met. You have a bank account full of money and a chest full of nothing. You are hollow. Both of you." I watched from the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maya was standing behind me, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to pull him back to keep him safe, but she knew he had to do this. "I do not need your money," Jamal continued, his voice rising again. "I do not want your help. I do not want your charity. You can keep your millions. You can keep your mansions and your cars and your fake friends." He turned back and pointed at me. "He is mine now. You threw him away. You discarded him like a wrapper. Fine. I will take him. I will take the burden. I will take the mess. Because unlike you, I remember. I remember who bought me my first book. I remember who taught me to tie my tie. I remember who I am. Desmond Carter is my father, and as long as I have breath in my body, he will never spend another night in the rain. He will never eat scraps, and he will never ever be humiliated by the likes of you again." The hallway fell silent. The echo of his voice hung in the air like smoke. For a second, I saw something flicker in Serena's eyes. Shame. It was there just for a heartbeat. But then she looked at her shoes, her expensive Italian heels, and the shame was replaced by her armor of arrogance. Marcus, however, didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. He looked like a man who was wasting time on a bad investment. He adjusted his silk scarf, smoothing the wrinkles with exaggerated care. "That is a very pretty speech," Jamal Marcus said, his voice dripping with venom. "Really, very moving. You should use that in your drama class. I am sure the underprivileged kids would love it." He took a step forward, invading Jamal's space. He lowered his voice, making it sharp and cruel. "But let's look at the reality, little brother. You say he is yours. You say you will take care of him." With what, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up. "I ran a background check on you this morning, Jamal. I was curious. And guess what I found? Your credit score is in the toilet. You are maxed out on 3 credit cards. And oh, here is the best part. He smirked a twisted, ugly expression. You have an eviction filing pending. 3 days, Jamal. You have 3 days before the sheriff comes to throw you your pregnant wife and now your precious father out onto the street. Jamal went rigid. He didn't know Marcus knew. He thought he had hidden the shame. So tell me, Marcus sneered, leaning in close. How are you going to feed him? Are you going to feed him love? Are you going to pay the rent with memories? You are drowning, Jamal. You are about to be homeless yourself. You are pathetic. You are trying to play the hero, but you are just a failure who is about to drag everyone down with him. Serena laughed. It was a high, cruel sound. He is right, Jamal. You cannot even take care of yourself. Maybe you should sign the dad over to the state. At least the homeless shelter has heat. Jamal stood there shaking. The fight was draining out of him, replaced by the crushing weight of the truth. He looked at Maya. He looked at me. He looked like a man who had been stabbed in the heart. He didn't have a comeback. He didn't have a defense. Because Marcus was right. He was broke. He was desperate. Marcus saw the weakness. He went in for the kill. Do yourself a favor, Jamal. Let the old man go. Let him go to the state. Stop pretending you are a man. You are just a boy playing house in a slum. Marcus laughed again, turning to Serena. Come on, I am done with this smell. He turned his back on Jamal. That was the mistake. That was the moment the world shifted. Inside the apartment, inside the worn-out armchair, something snapped. Not a bone, not a mind, but a chain. The chain I had placed on myself to play this role. The chain of the frail, beaten-down old man. I let go of the armrests. I stood up. I didn't push myself up with a groan. I didn't wobble. I didn't reach for the wall to steady myself. I rose. It was a fluid, powerful motion. The motion of a man who had built skyscrapers. The motion of a man who had commanded boardrooms and broken strikes. My back straightened. The curve of my spine, bent by the feigned weight of age and defeat, snapped into a vertical line of steel. My shoulders squared. The tremors in my hands vanished instantly, replaced by steady, lethal calm. I walked to the door. My footsteps were different now. They weren't the shuffling steps of a beggar. They were heavy, deliberate, rhythmic. The sound of a gavel striking a block. I stepped out into the hallway. Jamal was still trembling, his head bowed under the weight of Marcus's insults. I reached out and placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. He flinched, looking up. He expected to see his scared, bankrupt father. He saw Desmond Carter. He saw the eyes that had stared down union bosses. He saw the jaw that was set like granite. He saw the cold, hard fire that had forged an empire. Jamal gasped. He took a step back, confusion washing over his face. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't look at him. My eyes were locked on the backs of Marcus and Serena. "Enough," I said. I didn't shout, I didn't scream. I spoke the word at a normal volume, but the tone was freezing. It carried the weight of absolute, undeniable authority. It was a command that stopped the air in the hallway. Marcus stopped mid-step. Serena froze. That voice. They knew that voice. They hadn't heard that voice in 10 years. That wasn't the voice of the man asking for a bed. That was the voice of the chairman. Slowly, terrifyingly slowly, Marcus turned around. He looked at me. He looked at my posture. He looked at the way I was standing, feet apart, hands relaxed but ready, head high. The smirk fell off his face. It didn't fade. It fell. It shattered on the floor. "Dad," Marcus stammered, his voice suddenly small. "What? What is—" I stepped past Jamal. I walked toward them. I didn't limp. My bad hip was forgotten. I moved like a predator, closing the distance on trapped prey. "You said he was a failure," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous. "You said he was drowning. You said he was a boy playing house." I stopped 3 feet from Marcus. I towered over him. Even though he was younger, even though he was wearing a $4,000 coat, he looked tiny. He shrank. "You ran a background check, Marcus," I said softly. "You looked at his credit score. You looked at his bank account." I leaned in. My face was inches from his. I saw the sweat bead on his upper lip. "But you forgot to check one thing," I whispered. What is that?" Marcus breathed, unable to look away from my eyes. "You forgot to check who was standing behind him." I reached into my pocket. Not the pocket with the legal waiver. The pocket with the burner phone. I pulled it out. I threw it on the floor. It smashed into pieces. Then I reached into my other pocket, the inside pocket of the wet, dirty coat. I pulled out the satellite phone, the titanium one, the one that connected directly to the private line of the most powerful law firm in New York. I held it up. Marcus's eyes widened. He recognized the phone. He knew what that phone meant. That was the war phone. That was the phone I used when I was about to acquire a company or destroy a competitor. "Dad, wait," Marcus said, holding up his hands. "Wait a second. You said the IRS." I smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It was a smile that promised the end of the world. "I lied," I said. Serena gasped. She clutched her fur coat, taking a step back toward the elevator. "It was a test," I said, my voice ringing in the hallway. "A simple test. I wanted to see who my children were. I wanted to see what was underneath the expensive clothes and the trust funds." I looked at Jamal, who was staring at me with his mouth open, realizing that the father he had just tried to save was not the man he thought he was. "And I found out," I said, turning back to Marcus. "I found a king living in a slum. And I found 2 beggars living in mansions." I flipped the phone open. I dialed one number. Speed dial 1. Harrison Price answered on the first ring. "Yes, Mr. Carter." The lawyer's voice came through loud and clear in the silent hallway. "Bring the car, Harrison," I said, never taking my eyes off Marcus. "And bring the checkbook. The big one." "Yes, sir. We are around the corner. ETA 1 minute." I snapped the phone shut. Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. Serena was shaking her head, whispering "no, no, no" over and over again. I stepped back to stand next to Jamal. I put my arm around him. I felt him trembling, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from shock. "You called him trash," I said to Marcus. "You called this place a hole." I looked around the peeling hallway. "You are right. It is a hole. But it is the place where I found my son. My real son." I pointed at the elevator. "Run," I said. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Run." I roared, the anger finally exploding. "Run back to your glass houses before I decide to buy the bank you work for and fire you on public television. Run before I decide to foreclose on your mortgages tonight. Run." They didn't wait. They didn't argue. They scrambled for the stairs, tripping over each other, terrified of the monster they had provoked. I watched them go. Then I turned to Jamal. He was looking at me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he whispered. You are not broke." I looked at him and the steel left my eyes. The love rushed back in. "No, son," I said gently. "I am not broke, and as of right now, neither are you." From outside, the sound of a heavy engine purred. The headlights of a Rolls-Royce Phantom swept across the dirty hallway window, illuminating us in a wash of pure white light. The test was over. The reign of the beggar billionaire had ended. The reign of justice was about to begin. The silence in the hallway was absolute, a vacuum created by the shock of my revelation. Marcus stood there with his mouth slightly open, his brain trying to process the impossibility of what I had just said. Serena was clutching her fur coat, her eyes darting between me and the stairwell as if she were trapped in a cage with a tiger that had suddenly woken up. Jamal was still holding my arm, his grip trembling not from fear anymore, but from a complete unmooring of his reality. The peeling paint on the walls, the smell of damp concrete, the flickering yellow bulb, everything felt suspended in time. Then the world began to shake. It started as a low vibration, a deep rhythmic thrumming that I felt in the soles of my feet before I heard it with my ears. It wasn't the rattling of the old pipes or the passing of a heavy truck. It was a sound I knew intimately. It was a sound that Marcus, with his obsession for status symbols, knew even better. It was the purr of 12 cylinders firing in perfect harmony. It was the sound of engineering perfection. It was the sound of power. The vibration grew louder, a deep bass note that seemed to resonate in the chest. It was joined by another and then another, a symphony of engines that did not belong in a neighborhood where the average car was held together by duct tape and prayers. Marcus turned his head toward the dirty, wire-reinforced window at the end of the hall. The glass was grime-streaked, offering only a hazy view of the street below, but suddenly the darkness outside was obliterated. Beams of pure, brilliant white light swept across the face of the building. They were laser headlights cutting through the gloom of the slums like searchlights from a spaceship. The light poured through the window, casting long, stark shadows of the 4 of us against the peeling walls. "What is that?" Serena whispered, her voice trembling. Is that the police?" Marcus didn't answer. He walked to the window, his movements stiff and jerky. He wiped a circle in the grime with the sleeve of his $4,000 coat. He peered out. I watched his back. I saw his shoulders stiffen. I saw his hand grip the window frame so hard that his knuckles turned white. No, he breathed the word escaping him like a dying gasp. "That is not the police." I let go of Jamal gently. I walked over to the window and stood next to Marcus. I didn't need to look out to know what was there, but I wanted to see it through his eyes. I wanted to see the exact moment his world collapsed. Down on the street where potholes usually swallowed tires and trash littered the gutters, the transformation was complete. 3 vehicles had pulled up to the curb, parking with a military precision that left exactly 12 inches between bumpers. They were massive. They were black. They were terrifyingly beautiful. 3 Rolls-Royce Phantoms. They weren't just cars. They were land yachts. Their polished black paint absorbed the streetlights, looking like holes in the universe. The Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament stood proud on the grills, gleaming in the night. In a neighborhood where people sold their wedding rings for groceries, this fleet was an alien invasion. The neighbors were coming out. I saw Mrs. Higgins from the 4th floor leaning over her balcony in her bathrobe. I saw the teenagers who had robbed me, or kids who looked just like them, staring from the corner, their bravado gone, replaced by awe and fear. "That is the extended wheelbase model," Marcus whispered, his voice sounding hollow. "That is the bespoke edition. Those cars cost $600,000 each. There are 3 of them. That is almost $2 million of rolling steel sitting in front of a tenement building." Who are they?" Serena asked, joining us at the window, her voice rising in panic. "They are not they," Marcus said, turning to look at me with eyes wide with horror. "They are him." As we watched, the rear doors of the lead and trail cars opened in perfect synchronization. 6 men stepped out. They were huge men dressed in black suits that fit too well to be off the rack. They wore earpieces. They moved with the fluid, dangerous grace of men who were paid very well to be dangerous. They scanned the street, their eyes dissecting the shadows, clearing the perimeter. One of them looked up at the window where we were standing. He saw me. He tapped his earpiece and nodded. Then the driver of the middle car stepped out. He walked around to the rear passenger door. He didn't rush. He moved with the solemnity of a ritual. He opened the door. A man stepped out. He was tall, thin, and silver-haired. He was wearing a navy blue pinstripe suit that I knew was tailored on Savile Row in London. He carried himself with an air of quiet, lethal competence. In his right hand he held a briefcase made of dark, textured leather, crocodile skin. It was Harrison Price, my chief legal counsel, my consigliere, the man who knew where every body was buried because he had helped me dig the graves. Harrison looked up at the building. He didn't look at the trash on the sidewalk. He didn't look at the graffiti. He looked straight at the window, locked eyes with me, and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "He is coming up," I said calmly. I turned away from the window and walked back to the center of the hallway. I stood there waiting. The sound of footsteps on the stairs began. Click, click, click. It was a sharp, distinct sound, the sound of leather soles on concrete. It got louder, closer. Marcus and Serena backed away from the stairwell door as if it were radioactive. They pressed themselves against the wall, huddled together. Jamal stood by the open door of his apartment, Maya peeking out from behind him. They looked terrified. They didn't understand. They thought maybe I was in trouble. They thought maybe these were the debt collectors, the high-end loan sharks coming to break my legs. The footsteps stopped at the landing. Harrison Price turned the corner. 2 bodyguards flanked him, filling the narrow hallway with their bulk. The bodyguards looked at Marcus and Serena, analyzing them as potential threats, then dismissed them as irrelevant. Harrison walked straight to me. He ignored the peeling paint. He ignored the smell of boiled cabbage that still lingered in the air. He ignored the 2 people cowering against the wall in their expensive coats. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. He set the crocodile briefcase down on the dirty floor. He straightened his jacket. And then he bowed. It wasn't a deep theatrical bow. It was a sharp inclination of the head, a gesture of profound respect from one powerful man to another. "Good evening, Mr. Chairman," Harrison said. His voice was smooth-cultured, the voice of Ivy League education and old money. "I apologize for the delay, sir. The traffic on the I-95 was heavier than anticipated, and the GPS had some trouble locating this specific address." He looked around the hallway briefly, his expression neutral before his eyes snapped back to mine. "We have secured the perimeter, sir. The extraction team is ready at your command, and I have the documents you requested via the secure line." He gestured to the briefcase. Marcus let out a noise that sounded like a whimper. "Harrison," Marcus squeaked. "Harrison Price. You are the senior partner at Price and Sterling. You represent the Fortune 500. Harrison turned his head slowly to look at Marcus. He looked at him over the top of his rimless glasses. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a handshake. Mr. Marcus Carter Harrison said, his tone dropping several degrees in temperature. "I was under the impression that you were no longer a person of interest to the chairman." The chairman, Serena, breathed. Harrison turned back to me, ignoring them again. "Sir, do you require me to remove these individuals from the premises? My security detail can escort them to their vehicles if they are causing a disturbance." I looked at Marcus and Serena. They were pale, shaking. The reality was crashing down on them like a collapsing building. The cars, the bodyguards, the lawyer who charged $2,000 an hour standing in a slum hallway calling their father Mr. Chairman. "No, Harrison," I said, my voice steady. "Let them stay. They need to see this. They need to witness the business we are about to conduct." Harrison nodded. "Very good, sir." He picked up the briefcase. He walked past me and looked into the apartment. He saw Jamal. He saw Maya. He saw the mattress on the floor. He saw the poverty. But Harrison was a man who knew me. He knew what I valued. He walked up to Jamal. Jamal flinched, stepping back. Harrison stopped. A genuine warmth entered his eyes, a look I had rarely seen in 30 years of working with him. Mr. Jamal Carter Harrison said gently, "It is an honor to finally meet you. Your father speaks of you often." He extended his hand. Jamal stared at the hand. He looked at me. I nodded. Jamal reached out and shook Harrison's hand. His grip was limp, dazed. I do not understand," Jamal stammered. What is happening?" Harrison smiled. He turned to me. "Shall we go inside, Mr. Chairman? I believe we have some urgent financial restructuring to attend to, and I have a check here that I believe needs to be delivered to its rightful owner." I walked over to Jamal. I placed my hands on his shoulders. I felt the tension in his muscles, the adrenaline still coursing through him from his defense of me. "Let's go inside, son," I said softly. "It is time to pay the rent." I guided him back into the tiny apartment. Harrison followed. The bodyguards took up positions on either side of the door, folding their arms, blocking the exit. Marcus and Serena took a step forward, trying to follow us in. One of the bodyguards moved, just a shift of weight. A massive arm blocked the doorway. "Family only," the bodyguard grunted. Marcus stopped. But we are family," he cried, his voice shrill with desperation. "I am his son. That is my father in there." The bodyguard didn't blink. He looked at Marcus's expensive coat. He looked at the fear in his eyes. "Not anymore," the bodyguard said. He reached out and grabbed the handle of the door. I looked back one last time before the door closed. I saw Marcus reaching out, his face twisted in a mask of regret and greed. I saw Serena crying, her mascara running down her cheeks. I looked at them, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the cold indifference of a business transaction that had been concluded. "Close it," I said. The bodyguards slammed the door in their faces. The sound was final. It was the sound of a vault locking. It was the sound of a judge banging a gavel. We were inside. The air was warm. The smell of chili was still there, but the atmosphere had changed. The poverty was still in the walls, but the power was in the room. Harrison placed the crocodile briefcase on the scarred wooden table right next to the empty soup bowls. The contrast was stark. The leather looked alien against the cheap laminate. He clicked the gold latches. Snap, snap. The sound was loud in the small room. He opened the lid. Inside, sitting on top of a stack of legal documents, was a check. It wasn't a standard personal check. It was a cashier's check drawn from the Central Reserve of Carter Holdings. I walked over to the table. I picked up the check. I looked at the number. $75 million. I turned to Jamal. He was standing by the stove holding Maya's hand. They looked like two children lost in a forest. "Come here," I said. They walked over slowly. "Jamal," I said, "you sold your wedding ring today. You sold it for $200 to buy me soup." Jamal looked down ashamed. "Dad, You did it because you thought I was poor. I continued. You did it because you possess a wealth that your brother and sister will never understand. You have a heart of gold, son. And today I am going to make sure the rest of your life matches the quality of that heart. I held out the check. Take it, I said. Jamal looked at the paper. He squinted. He read the number. His knees gave out. He didn't faint, but he collapsed into the chair. Maya gasped, covering her mouth, her eyes bulging. 70. 75. Jamal couldn't even finish the sentence. It is yours, I said. It is your inheritance. It is your back pay for every year I neglected you. It is the endowment for your school. It is the nursery for your baby. It is whatever you want it to be, but the IRS, Jamal whispered. There is no IRS, Harrison interjected softly. Your father's company just posted its highest quarterly profits in history. This capital was transferred this morning from his private trust. It is tax-free, and it is entirely yours. Jamal looked up at me. He was crying now, hard-racking sobs that shook his whole body. Why, he choked out. Why did you do this, Dad? Why did you pretend? I walked over and knelt down beside him. I ignored the pain in my hip. I took his face in my hands. Because I needed to know, I whispered, wiping a tear from his cheek. I needed to know if anyone loved Desmond Carter, or if they just loved the CEO. And you showed me, Jamal. You showed me love when I had nothing to give you in return. That is the only love that counts. I stood up and looked at Harrison. Now I said, my voice hardening again. Let's discuss the other matter, the matter of the debt collectors. Harrison smiled, pulling a red file from the briefcase. I have the papers here, sir. We have acquired the promissory notes for Marcus's outstanding business loans, and we have purchased the mortgage on Serena's penthouse from the bank. Good, I said. Execute the foreclosure clauses. Immediately. Tonight, Sir Harrison asked, arching an eyebrow. Tonight, I said. They wanted to leave me in the cold. Let's see how they like the weather. I looked at the closed door, imagining Marcus and Serena standing on the other side. The Rolls-Royces were waiting outside. The check was on the table. The rings would be recovered tomorrow. My son was safe. My legacy was secure. And the lesson had just begun. The bodyguard's hand was on the doorknob, ready to seal the tomb of my relationship with Marcus and Serena forever, but a thought struck me. A cold, sharp thought that cut through the heat of the moment. If I closed the door now, they would leave thinking I was crazy. They would think I had hired actors. They would think the Rolls-Royces were rentals. They would rationalize their cruelty by telling themselves I was just a senile old man playing a prank. No, that was too easy. They needed to see the ink. They needed to smell the money they had just forfeited. Wait, I commanded. The bodyguard froze. Open it, I said. Let them watch. The bodyguard pushed the door back open. Marcus and Serena were standing there in the hallway looking like deer caught in headlights. They hadn't run yet. They were paralyzed by confusion, trying to reconcile the image of their beggar father with the reality of the motorcade outside. Chloe was clutching her purse to her chest, her eyes darting around the peeling hallway as if expecting a SWAT team to rappel from the ceiling. They stared into the apartment. They saw Harrison Price standing by the table. They saw the crocodile briefcase. And they saw me. I reached up to my head. For the past 4 days, I had been wearing a subtle, patchy gray wig and a layer of theatrical latex on my neck to make my skin look looser, sicker. I grabbed the edge of the wig near my temple. With one swift motion, I peeled it off. Underneath my hair was short-trimmed close to the scalp, peppered with gray but thick and strong. I took the wet towel Maya had used for my feet and wiped the makeup from my face, scrubbing away the artificial liver spots and the gray pallor I had applied. I stood up straighter, rolling my shoulders back until my spine cracked into alignment. I shed the wet thrift store coat, letting it drop to the floor in a heap of dirty wool. Underneath, I was wearing a simple white undershirt, but on my wrist, the Rolex President that I had kept hidden in my pocket finally caught the light. Marcus gasped. The sound was audible from across the room. He took a step forward, his eyes bulging. "Dad," he whispered, you are not sick." I looked at him with eyes that were clear and sharp. "No, Marcus," I said. "I am not sick, and I am certainly not bankrupt." Harrison Price stepped forward, adjusting his rimless glasses. He spoke to the room, but his words were clearly directed at the audience in the hallway. Mr. Carter did not lose his company to the IRS. Harrison stated, his voice calm and professional. On the contrary. At 9 a.m. this morning, Mr. Carter successfully closed a deal with Yamato Logistics of Tokyo. Marcus's jaw dropped. I could see his banker's brain doing the math instantly. Yamato Logistics. It was the biggest merger news of the year. He had probably read about the rumors in the Wall Street Journal but never connected the dots. You sold... Marcus stammered. You sold the shipping division. 49%, Harrison corrected. Mr. Carter retains majority control in the chairman's seat. But the liquidity event, well, it was substantial. Harrison reached into the briefcase. He didn't pull out a stack of papers. He pulled out a single slip of paper. It was rectangular pale blue with complex watermarks that shimmered under the kitchen light. He walked over to me and held it out with 2 hands. The first installment of the buyout, Sir Harrison said. As per your instructions, issued as a certified cashier's check payable immediately. I took the check. It felt light in my hand, but it carried the weight of a planet. I looked at the numbers, $75 million and 0 cents. I turned the check outward. I held it up. I didn't hold it toward Jamal. I held it toward the doorway. Look at it, Marcus, I said. Read the zeros. Marcus leaned in, drawn by the gravitational pull of the money. He squinted. When he registered the amount, the color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a corpse. He staggered back, hitting the wall of the hallway. Serena put a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Her eyes were locked on that piece of paper. That was more money than she would see in 10 lifetimes of selling condos. And Chloe, poor shallow Chloe. She stared at the check, and then she looked at me, the man she had fed scraps to in a garage. The realization of what she had done hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, her hand went limp. The expensive Hermes Birkin bag she was holding, the symbol of her status, the shield she used to separate herself from the poor, slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor with a loud, distinct clatter. Contents spilled out. Lipstick, credit cards, a half-eaten protein bar. It lay there in the dust of the hallway, ignored. 75 million, Marcus breathed. Dad, please, we didn't know. It was a misunderstanding. We were just stressed. I turned my back on them. I dismissed them as easily as turning a page. I looked at Jamal. He was still sitting in the chair, looking at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. He wasn't looking at the check. He was looking at my face. He was looking for his father. Jamal, I said softly. I walked over to him. I took his hand, the hand that was missing a wedding ring, and I pressed the check into his palm. I closed his fingers over it. This is yours, I said. Jamal looked down at his fist. He shook his head violently. No, Dad, he choked out. I cannot take this. It is too much. I do not want it. I just wanted you to be okay. That is exactly why you get it, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Marcus wanted the money, so he got nothing. You wanted a father, so you get everything. I looked over my shoulder at the hallway. Did you hear that, Marcus? I called out. He doesn't want it. Marcus looked like he was going to cry. He looked at Jamal, holding the fortune he had coveted his entire life. Take it, son, I whispered to Jamal. Use it. Build that new history wing for your school. Buy a house where your baby can run in the grass. Buy Maya a ring that shines as bright as her soul. It is not charity. It is payment. It is payment for the lesson you taught me tonight. Jamal looked at Maya. She was crying silently, holding her hands over her heart. She nodded at him. Not because of the money, but because she understood what the money represented. It was his vindication. Jamal looked back at me. He took a deep breath. Thank you, Dad, he whispered. I turned back to the door. Marcus was taking a step forward, his hand reached out in a pathetic gesture of begging. Dad, wait, Marcus cried out. Can we just talk? Please, I can explain. I looked at Harrison. Harrison nodded. He snapped his fingers. The 2 massive bodyguards stepped into the doorway, filling the frame completely. They crossed their arms. Show them out, I said. And Harrison, yes, sir, give them the other papers. Harrison smiled. He reached into his briefcase again. He didn't pull out checks this time. He pulled out 2 thick envelopes. They were red, the color of emergency, the color of debt. He walked to the door and handed one to Marcus and one to Serena. Compliments of the chairman, Harrison said. "What is this?" Marcus asked, his hands trembling as he tore open the envelope. I watched him read the first line. I saw his eyes widen in horror. "It is a foreclosure notice, Marcus," I said from across the room, "and a call on your margin loans. You see, when I bought the bank's bad debt portfolio this morning, I noticed your name came up quite a bit." Marcus looked up, terror in his eyes. You own my debt," he whispered. "I own everything, Marcus," I said, "and unlike the bank, I do not offer grace periods. Get them out of here," I commanded the guards. "No, Dad. No." The guards stepped forward, pushing the vultures back toward the stairwell. Chloe was scrambling to pick up her lipstick from the floor, sobbing hysterically. Serena was screaming something about a lawsuit. Marcus was just staring at the red paper, realizing his life was over. The bodyguard reached for the handle. This time, when the door slammed, it didn't just shut out the noise, it shut out the past. The lock clicked. Silence returned to the tiny apartment. But it wasn't the silence of poverty anymore. It was the silence of peace. I looked at Jamal. He was holding the check, but he wasn't looking at it. He put it on the table and stood up. He walked over to me and wrapped his arms around me. "I missed you, Dad," he said. I hugged him back, burying my face in his shoulder. "I am back, son," I whispered. "I am finally back." The $75 million sat on the scratched laminate table, fluttering slightly in the draft. It was just paper. The real treasure was holding me in his arms. But the paper was going to be a very useful tool for what came next. Because while I had rewarded the good, I still had a little more work to do to punish the wicked. And the night was still young. The bodyguards had just dragged Marcus and Serena into the hallway, and the heavy door had clicked shut, sealing the silence. But as I stood there in the center of the room, looking at the peace on Jamal's face, I realized that silence wasn't enough. Silence allows for ambiguity. Silence allows for hope. And I needed to make sure that when my children walked down those stairs and into the cold night, they carried no hope with them, only the crushing weight of absolute certainty. "Open it," I said. Jamal looked up from the table, confused. "Dad, let them go. It is over." "No," I said, turning to face the door. "It is not over until the ink is dry. Harrison, get the document." "The final one." Harrison nodded, his face impassive. He reached into the briefcase and pulled out a document bound in blue leather. The last will and testament of Desmond Carter. The bodyguard opened the door. Marcus and Serena were huddled by the stairwell, arguing with the security team, trying to negotiate, trying to use their names as currency in a place where their names were now worthless. Chloe was sitting on the dirty steps, weeping into her hands. When the door opened, they all looked up. A flicker of relief crossed Marcus's face. He thought I had changed my mind. He thought the father in me had finally overridden the CEO. He rushed back to the doorway, Serena close behind him. "Dad," Marcus breathed, stepping into the room. "Thank God. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't do this. We can fix this right. We can talk about a payment plan for the debt." I didn't answer. I just pointed to the spot in the center of the room, right in front of the table where the $75 million check still lay. "Stand there," I commanded. They shuffled into the spot, looking like naughty schoolchildren called to the principal's office, except the stakes weren't detention. The stakes were their lives. "Harrison," I said. "Read it." Harrison stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. He opened the blue folder. The crisp sound of the paper was the only noise in the room. "This is the 7th amended last will and testament of Desmond Carter, dated today 11:45 p.m. Harrison began, his voice baritone and formal. Marcus went pale. "Amended today," Harrison continued, ignoring him. "Article 1 regarding the distribution of assets. To my eldest son Marcus Carter and my daughter Serena Carter." He paused. The room held its breath. Marcus leaned forward, hope fighting against reason in his eyes. "I leave the sum of $1 each." The words hung in the air. $1. $1, Serena shrieked. Her voice broke into a high pitch of disbelief. $1, Dad, you are worth billions. This is illegal. You cannot disinherit us like that. "I leave this sum." Harrison continued reading the clause I had dictated to him over the phone just hours ago, with the specific instruction that it be delivered in the form of a single physical banknote. This bequest is not intended to provide financial support, but to serve as a permanent reminder. Harrison looked up from the paper, his eyes locking onto Marcus. A reminder of the feeling of having only $1 in your pocket when you are turned away by your own blood. A reminder of the moment you decided that a father's value was less than the price of a dry cleaning bill. I walked over to the table. I reached into my own pocket and pulled out 2 crisp single-dollar bills. I didn't hand them over. I let them flutter from my fingers. They drifted down through the air, slow and pathetic, landing on the floor at their feet. "There is your inheritance," I said softly. "Don't spend it all in one place." Marcus stared at the dollar bill near his shoe. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Dad, this is insane," he stammered. "You can't leave us with nothing. We have lives. We have expenses. You can't just cut us off." "Oh, but I haven't just cut you off, Marcus," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "Leaving you with nothing would be a mercy, and I am not feeling merciful tonight." I nodded at Harrison. "The debt portfolio." Harrison closed the will and reached back into the crocodile briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of files. These weren't the red foreclosure notices. These were black, thick, detailed financial dossiers. He handed the first file to me. I opened it. I scanned the pages. "Marcus," I said, looking up, "I see here that your hedge fund, Carter Capital, the one you started with my money, has been taking some aggressive positions lately. Very risky. You leveraged heavily on shorting the tech sector." Marcus's eyes widened. How do you know that? That is private data." "When you buy the bank that holds the loans, nothing is private," I said. "I see you are underwater by about $4 million. You were banking on your bonus this quarter to cover the margin call." I flipped the page. "And since I just fired you effectively immediately, as I am now the majority shareholder of the bank, there will be no bonus, which means the loan is due, in full." I closed the file and slapped it against my palm. "I bought the note this morning, Marcus. I bought it at a discount because the bank thought it was toxic debt. They were right. It is toxic. And now I am the toxic avenger." I tossed the file onto the table. "From tomorrow morning, your creditor is not a faceless bank algorithm. It is me. And unlike the bank, I do not negotiate extensions. I do not offer refinancing. I want my money, every single cent. But I don't have $4 million. Marcus screamed, tears streaming down his face. "If you call the loan, I will be bankrupt. They will take everything." "I know," I said calmly. "That is the point. Welcome to the bottom, son. It is crowded down here." I turned to Serena. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. "And you, my real estate queen," I said, picking up the second file. Serena flinched as if I had raised a hand to strike her. "I see you have been expanding your portfolio," I said, reading the file. "Virtual real estate, metaverse properties, NFTs. You leveraged your physical apartment buildings to buy digital land that doesn't exist. It is the future." Serena cried weakly. "It is an investment. It is a bubble," I corrected. "And it just popped. I bought the liens on your physical properties, Serena. All of them. The Sterling Heights building, the condos in Buckhead, even your personal penthouse." I leaned in close. "You are technically squatting in my buildings, Serena, and I have a very strict policy against squatters who turn their fathers away in the lobby." I dropped her file on top of Marcus's. "You owe me $6 million, Serena, and I am charging prime plus 10% interest, starting now." Serena's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, her white fur coat pooling around her like a puddle of spilt milk. She grabbed the hem of my trousers. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "I will work. I will do anything. I will be your assistant. I will clean your house. Just don't ruin me. Please. I can't be poor. I don't know how to be poor." I looked down at her. I remembered the little girl in pigtails who used to ask for a pony. I gave her the pony. I gave her everything. And in doing so, I had crippled her. I had taken away her ability to survive. "You are going to learn, Serena," I said, stepping back from her grasp. "You are going to learn how to clip coupons. You are going to learn how to take the bus. You are going to learn what it feels like to count pennies at the grocery store." I looked at Marcus, who was staring at the wall catatonic. "And you, Marcus. You are going to learn that a man's worth isn't measured by the cut of his suit, but by the strength of his character. You have neither right now." I gestured to the door. "Now get out. For real this time. The locks on your houses are being changed as we speak. My security team is already there packing your personal effects clothing and toiletries only. Everything else, the art, the jewelry, the furniture stays. It is collateral against your debts." Chloe let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. My jewelry, my grandmother's ring. Your grandmother's ring was reset in platinum that Marcus paid for with a credit card he never paid off, I said. So yes, the ring stays. Harrison checked his watch. Sir, the sheriff is scheduled to arrive at their respective residences in 20 minutes to oversee the eviction. If they leave now, they might arrive in time to collect their toothbrushes. I nodded. You heard the man, I said. You have 20 minutes before you are locked out. I suggest you start running. You don't have cars anymore, remember? The bank repossessed those too. Marcus looked at me one last time. The arrogance was gone. The pride was gone. All that was left was a terrified, middle-aged boy who realized he was naked in the winter. Dad, he whispered. Why I picked up the check for $75 million from the table. I folded it carefully and placed it in Jamal's shirt pocket. Because I love you, Marcus, I said, and because I failed you. I made life too easy for you, and it made you weak. Now I'm going to do the hardest thing a father can do. I am going to let you fall. I pointed to the door. Go. They didn't argue. They didn't scream. They scrambled. They picked themselves up from the floor and ran. They ran out of the apartment, down the hallway, and into the stairwell. I listened to their footsteps fading away, frantic, clumsy, desperate. I walked to the door and closed it gently. I locked the deadbolt. I turned back to the room. Jamal and Maya were staring at me wide-eyed. They had just witnessed a massacre, a financial execution. I walked over to the armchair and sat down. The adrenaline was fading, and suddenly I felt very old. Was it too much? Jamal asked softly. I looked at the dollar bills still lying on the floor where Marcus and Serena had stood. No, son, I said, closing my eyes. It was exactly enough. I took a deep breath, smelling the lingering scent of chili and the new, crisp scent of victory. Now, I said, opening my eyes. Who wants dessert? I believe we have a victory to celebrate. And tomorrow, we go ring shopping. Harrison smiled, closing the briefcase. I will drive, sir. I looked at Jamal. No, I said. Jamal drives. He has a motorcycle to buy back first. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the laughter in the room wasn't forced. It was real. It was the sound of a family healing $1 and one hard lesson at a time. It has been 6 months since the night of the long knives. 6 months since I peeled off a wig in a hallway and watched my family shatter into pieces. They say time heals all wounds, but I have found that time is also an excellent accountant. It tallies every debt and it ensures that every balance is paid in full. I am sitting on a park bench made of warm oak, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves of a massive willow tree. The air smells of freshly cut grass and baby powder. In my arms, wrapped in a blanket knitted by Maya, sleeps my grandson. We named him Justice. It seemed appropriate given the circumstances of his arrival into a world that had finally righted itself. But before I tell you about the peace I have found, I must tell you about the war that ended. I must tell you about the price of greed, because my children, Marcus and Serena, have paid it with every shred of dignity they had left. Let us start with Marcus, my eldest son, the banker who thought he was a king. I went to see him yesterday, not to gloat but to collect. He works at a small community bank now in a branch tucked away inside a grocery store. He does not have a corner office with a view of the skyline. He sits in a cubicle that smells of sanitizer and floor wax. He wears a suit that he bought off the rack because his bespoke Italian suits were sold to pay his legal fees. I stood in line behind a woman depositing a jar of coins. When it was my turn, I walked up to the window. Marcus looked up. He looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning, and the arrogance that used to coat him like armor was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his left eye. "Hello, Marcus," I said. He didn't sneer. He didn't check his Rolex because he doesn't own one anymore. He just sighed a sound of deep, bone-weary resignation. "Hi, Dad," he whispered. I slid a deposit slip across the counter. It was his monthly payment to me. You see, I didn't destroy him completely. I didn't put him on the street. I simply became his bank. I restructured his debt. He owes me $4 million, and every month he pays me 40% of his paycheck. It will take him the rest of his life to pay it off. "How is the job?" I asked. "It is a job," he said, staring at his computer screen. "The manager is 24 years old, Dad. He yells at me if I take too long a lunch break." "And Chloe?" I asked, knowing the answer. Marcus laughed a dry, bitter sound. "Chloe left 3 days after the eviction. She said she couldn't be married to a man with negative equity. Her lawyer served me the papers at the Motel 6 where I was staying. She took the dog Dad. She didn't even like the dog. I nodded. I felt a twinge of pity, but I crushed it. Pity had created the monster Marcus used to be. Consequences were making him a man. I am learning, Dad, he said quietly. I take the bus now. I cook my own food. It is hard. Life is hard, Marcus, I said, taking my receipt. That is the lesson. I walked away, leaving him in his glass cage counting other people's money while he had none of his own. He was learning the value of $1 the hard way, one deposit slip at a time. Then there is Serena, my daughter, the influencer. The woman who built a castle out of clouds and filtered photos. Her fall was faster and much louder. After I seized her assets, the internet did what the internet does best. It ate her alive. Someone leaked the story of her eviction. Someone posted the video of her screaming at her father in the hallway. She lost 50,000 followers in a night. Her sponsors dropped her like a hot stone. The luxury brands that used to send her free handbags sent cease and desist letters instead. She works for a rental agency now in a strip mall near the airport. She shows budget apartments to college students and divorced men. I drove past her office last week. I saw her outside smoking a cigarette leaning against a dented Honda Civic. She wasn't wearing white fur. She was wearing a polyester blazer and comfortable shoes because she has to walk up and down stairs all day. She saw my car. She saw the Rolls Royce. She didn't wave. She just looked down at her shoes. She lives in a studio apartment now the size of her old shoe closet. She told Jamal that for the first time in her life she knows how much a gallon of milk costs. She told him that she cries every night, but she also told him that she is starting to sleep better because she doesn't have to lie anymore. She isn't the queen of real estate. She is just Serena. And maybe that is enough. But the real story, the story that matters, is not about their fall. It is about Jamal's rise. I looked up from my grandson to see Jamal walking across the grass toward us. He was wearing a suit, but not a stiff banker's suit. He looked relaxed, happy. Behind him stood a beautiful brick building with large windows and a playground filled with shouting, laughing children. The sign above the door read, "The Desmond Carter Center for Youth Excellence." Jamal didn't buy a mansion. He didn't buy a yacht. He took the check for $75 million, and he invested every penny of it back into the neighborhood that had sheltered him. He bought the block. He bought the pawn shop where he sold his ring and turned it into a library. He bought the condemned apartment building next door and renovated it into affordable housing for teachers. He kept the promise. He didn't change. He walked over to the bench and sat down next to me. He reached out and touched little Justice's cheek. "He looks like you," Dad, Jamal said, smiling. "He has your stubborn chin. I hope he has your heart, son," I said. Maya walked over, carrying 2 ice cream cones. She looked radiant. She wasn't wearing diamonds, but she was glowing with a peace that diamonds cannot buy. They had moved into the estate in Buckhead, yes, but they had opened the doors. The pool was open to the neighborhood kids on weekends. The ballroom hosted charity fundraisers. The house that was once a cold museum was now loud and messy and full of love. Dad, Maya said, handing me a cone. "The contractor said the new wing of the school will be finished by September. We are going to name the science lab after you too." I laughed. "One building is enough, Maya. I do not need my name on everything. I just need to be here." I looked at my family, the real one. In the last 6 months, I have learned more about wealth than I did in 40 years of business. I used to think wealth was what you could hoard. I thought it was the wall you built between yourself and the world. Marcus and Serena thought that too. They thought money was a shield. But sitting here on this bench eating ice cream with the son who was willing to starve for me, I realized that wealth is not a wall. It is a door. It is the ability to open a door for someone else. Jamal used his inheritance to open doors for thousands of children. He used it to heal a community, and in doing so he healed me. I still see Marcus and Serena. They come to Sunday dinner once a month. It is awkward. They are quiet. They eat the food Maya cooks, and they look around the big house that is no longer theirs. But they are polite. They say thank you. They clear the table. They are broken, yes, but it is a clean break, and bones heal stronger where they break. I looked down at my grandson. He gripped my finger with his tiny hand. His grip was strong. He would grow up with money, yes. He would never know hunger. But I would make sure he knew the story. I would tell him the story of the rainy night. I would tell him about the garage and the stairwell. I would tell him about the $20 bill and the bowl of soup. I would teach him that there are 2 kinds of people in this world. There are those who think they are too good to get wet, and there are those who build the shelter. Jamal stood up and stretched. "Ready to go home, Dad?" he asked. "Maya is making her famous chili tonight, and I promise I bought actual meat this time." I smiled, remembering the taste of that watery soup and the love that seasoned it. "I am ready, son," I said. I stood up, lifting the baby effortlessly. My hip didn't hurt. The cold was gone. I walked toward the car, flanked by my son and daughter. I was Desmond Carter. I was a billionaire. But as I walked past the playground where the children were laughing under the banner of my family name, I knew the truth. I wasn't the billionaire. I was just the banker. Jamal was the visionary, and little Justice sleeping in my arms was the future. The price of greed had been paid, but the reward of love was compounding interest every single day, and that I decided was a return on investment worth living for. The sun is beginning to set over the estate, casting long golden shadows across the lawn that stretches out before me like a green ocean. I am sitting in my favorite rocking chair on the wraparound porch, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand. The air is filled with the scent of magnolias and the sound of something that was missing from this property for 30 years. Laughter. Down by the old oak tree, I see Jamal. He is on his hands and knees in the grass, pretending to be a bear, while my grandson Justice shrieks with delight and toddles away on unsteady legs. Maya is sitting on a picnic blanket nearby, clapping her hands and cheering them on. It is a simple scene. It is the kind of scene you see in commercials for life insurance or laundry detergent. But to me, sitting here with my heart full to bursting, it is a miracle. I bought this house 25 years ago. I paid $15 million for it in cash. I hired the best interior designers in Atlanta to fill it with Italian marble and French antiques. I wanted it to be a palace. I wanted it to be a monument to Desmond Carter, the tycoon. And that is exactly what it was. A monument. Cold, impressive, and empty. Marcus and Serena grew up in these halls. They learned to walk on these floors, but they never learned to play. I was too busy building the empire. I was too busy ensuring that the grass was perfectly manicured and the furniture was never touched. I treated my home like a museum, and I treated my children like exhibits. I look at Jamal now, rolling in the grass, getting grass stains on his trousers. He is worth $85 million now. He could pay someone to play with his son. He could be sitting in a country club sipping scotch. But he is here. He is present. He is a father first and a wealthy man second. He kept his promise. The money didn't change him. It only amplified who he already was. The Desmond Carter Center for Youth Excellence opened its doors last week. I stood in the back while Jamal gave the speech. He didn't talk about me. He didn't talk about the money. He talked about the potential in every child. He talked about dignity. I watched him, and I realized that I had spent my life building a logistics company that moved boxes, while my son was building a life that moved souls. I almost missed this. The thought hits me with a cold shiver, even in the warmth of the evening. I almost missed this. If I hadn't put on that ragged coat, if I hadn't walked out into the rain that night, if I had stayed in my penthouse and let my pride dictate my reality, I would have died a fool. I would have died thinking that Marcus was my successor because he wore the right suits. I would have died thinking Serena was successful because she knew the right people. I would have died thinking Jamal was a failure. I judged him. God forgive me, I judged him. I looked at his worn-out shoes and his small apartment, and I saw a lack of ambition. I saw a man who couldn't cut it in the real world. I equated his kindness with weakness. I equated his poverty with incompetence. I was blind. Success isn't about the numbers on a balance sheet. It isn't about the square footage of your house or the brand of your car. Success is this. It is the ability to sleep at night with a clear conscience. It is the knowledge that if you lost everything tomorrow, there would still be a hand reaching out to pull you up. It is the sound of your son laughing with your grandson in a garden that used to be silent. Money can buy a house. I proved that. I bought 6 of them, but money cannot buy a home. Jamal and Maya brought the home with them. They brought it in their hearts. They brought it in the way they look at each other. They brought it in the way they welcomed me when they thought I was a beggar. I take a sip of my tea. It is sweet and cold. I think about Marcus and Serena sometimes. I don't hate them. I don't even dislike them anymore. I just pity them. They are out there somewhere chasing the ghost I used to chase. They are trying to fill the hole in their souls with things they can touch. I hope one day they wake up. I hope one day they find their own rainstorm and their own moment of truth. But until then, they are on their own journey. I have mine. Jamal stands up, brushing the grass off his knees. He scoops Justice up into his arms and swings him around. He looks up at the porch and sees me watching. He waves, a big, unself-conscious wave. "Hey, Dad," he calls out. "You okay up there?" "I am better than okay, son," I call back. "I am finally home." He smiles and turns back to his family. I lean back in the chair and close my eyes, listening to the wind rustle the leaves. I have played many roles in my life: CEO, chairman, tycoon. But the role I am playing now, the role of the grandfather sitting on the porch, is the only one that truly matters. I learned my lesson late in life, but I learned it. And if my story can teach you anything, let it be this. Do not wait until you are pretending to be a beggar to find out who really loves you. Look at the people in your life. Look at how they treat the waiter. Look at how they treat the janitor. Look at how they treat you when you have nothing to offer them but your presence. Because when the storm comes, and it always comes, the only roof that will hold is the one built with love. True wealth isn't defined by the balance in your bank account, but by the hands that hold you when you have nothing left. My children Marcus and Serena loved my wallet, but they despised my humanity. They chased the shadow of status and lost the substance of family. Only Jamal, who had the least to give, gave me everything. He taught me that dignity cannot be bought and loyalty cannot be sold. In the end, the poorest man in my family was the only one rich enough to afford a heart. Be careful what you value, for money is a good servant, but a terrible master. Thank you for listening to my story. It was a painful journey, but it led me to the most beautiful destination. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about life justice and the truth about human nature. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where you realized who your true friends or family were? Have you ever been judged by what you had instead of who you are? Let me know. I read every single comment. Until next time, remember to keep your heart open and your eyes clear. You never know when a beggar might turn out to be a king or when a king might just be a beggar in disguise. Stay blessed.